Good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started if you would. I love the networking, but we do have a lot of things to discuss today. So, good morning again. And my name is Sue Hansen. I'm one of the Montrose County Commissioners. And I'm not sure where my other commissioner partner, Commissioner Copeland is District 1 Commissioner. She's going to help out today, too. Considering the topic of the reason why we are all here today together, I thought we would start with the pledge. So if you would rise and join me in the pledge, the flag's right here. Cover off. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. How many of you here are new to the Water Summit? Raise your hand. Good. That's exactly what we want to see. We normally have a Water Summit in November. After attending the State of the River address by the Colorado River District, it was decided that we needed to step up the urgency and get some information into people's hands so you understand some of the situations that we're dealing with right now. Every year that I introduce the Water Summit, and I think we're on our 7th or 8th year, we can't remember how many times we've done it, but enough to where it's become kind of an institution for us here in Montrose. But I always approach the Water Summit with optimism, because I always think, surely there will be enough water this year. And I always look for the snow. We all do that. Anybody who's lived here for any amount of time, we're looking at the snow constantly. We're talking about the snow constantly. Do we have enough snowfall? Can we ski? Will there be water? And this year is the first year that I am not optimistic. And you're going to hear all kinds of speakers today talk about how the situation we're in. So if you're new to Montrose, this is unprecedented. And perhaps sobering for all of us. And so the reason why I wanted to start with the pledge, not that we normally start all our meetings with the pledge, but I wanted you all to just put you in the right mindset that we're all in this together. That we live in a valley that is a semi-arid desert, not really necessarily lots of rainfall. We're lucky when we have good snow years, but basically this is a year that will challenge every single one of us in this room. And when my husband and I first moved back to Montrose, we lived here in 87, left to go find jobs, but came back in 2000. And in 2002, it was also a drought year. And that year, I remember the ditch rider locking our water down. And I'm like, locking water down? What do you mean? I mean, there was actually a lock on the water. And that was because, everybody that's on that head gate, everybody who's sharing that water had to share. And you had to make sure that everybody had enough to do what they needed to do with their water and how many shares they had. To me, that was really sobering, because when you came from a place like Pennsylvania, water is not necessarily an issue. But guess what? When you live in a desert, it is an issue. And no more significant of year as this year is going to be, and you're going to hear that today. So I want to set the tone for the spirit of neighborliness, friendliness, kindness. We're going to be sharing water. You're not going to be happy with how much water you do or don't get. You may not have enough to do everything that you want to do with your water. You may not have enough to make that green lawn green. And you'll hear from a little bit from Scott Murphy. This is going to be a year where we all are going to have to pull together. And I've seen this community pull together for a number of different issues. This will be the pivotal issue for us, to pull together and to be kind and to be neighborly and to be understanding of what's going on, because everybody is doing more with less at this point. So how about that for a start? Really pretty exciting. Yeah. I think we're all going to have to tighten our belts, and the only reason we have water here, for those of you that are new, it is really important for you to understand where our water comes from and how dependent we are on that snowfall for that water. And if it doesn't snow, we don't have water. So the Gunnison Tunnel, we are ever thankful that we have the Gunnison Tunnel, because that brings water across to our valley. And that's why when you first arrive here, if you arrive here in the spring and you buy your property, you're like, oh, it's so green here. It's so awesome. This is great. And then you have to keep remembering that you live in a desert that happened to have abundant water over the years, but as we've seen over 20 years, the drought has taken hold, and this year again will be unprecedented. So a couple things I want to just to draw your attention to. Outside, the Chavano Valley Conservation District has a table, and here's a landowner's manual. So if you're new to the area, pick this up. Talks a little bit about how you need to treat your land, how our soil is, what's kind of going on in our valley. Really important for us to be in the know. If you moved here from Pennsylvania, you probably never thought about water beyond turning on the spigot. And you're like, there it is. I can shave, I can wash dishes, I can just let it run down the drain, it doesn't matter. That's not the mindset that we need to start with in the valley today. And I just saw a bug going by. So that's, I want you to think about that. Go out and talk to them and sort of learn more about your property. With drought comes fire. And we're looking at a potentially disastrous year this year with regarding fire. So I just want to draw your attention to, we have a new emergency manager, Christy Matthews. Where are you? Christy Matthews is over here. She's our new emergency manager from the county. Paul Eller is right over here. Give a wave. The City of Montrose emergency manager. They are going to be busy this year. So part of what the message I wanted to start with is that there's a card out on the table so you can sign up for emergency alerts. I want everybody in this room to be prepared. I want people in our valley to be knowledgeable. So if you could sign up for that, that will let you know if there's any issues going on, because there will be fires. We have lightning strikes as soon as the monsoons come. Who knows what's going to happen? So being fire aware, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that toward the end, preparing your properties, making sure that you have cleared debris and things like that. We need to be heightenedly aware this season of what could happen in our communities. And we've seen it all over the news. We've already seen fires in Nebraska. I don't want to see that here because we've been irresponsible with taking care of our properties. So is that enough lecturing for a bit? Here's what, and I do that with the spirit of my heart, is that I live here. I love this community. I don't want to see anything happen to it. And so when I hear people talking disparagingly about others, using more water, wasting water, doing this, doing that, that's not the spirit that we need to come at this with. We need to help educate. People are moving here from areas that did not have to have these challenges. So the spirit of the heart is what I want you to leave with this water summit today. With that, we're going to have 4 speakers, and I know you'll have questions. So we have those big Post-it notes on your table, and this is where you start to learn to share. You're going to share with your neighbor. So if you have questions of any of the speakers or just general questions, I want you to just write them down legibly. And then at the end, when everybody's done with their presentation, we're going to come up here and convene, and Commissioner Copeland will moderate sort of a panel of the questions. Additionally, if you have a personal anecdote and you want to tell us about your property or something like that, I would like to ask that our questions are pertinent and relevant to what we're talking about today. If you have something else, call us. Kirsten and I are always willing to talk. The water users, we can call them. We have lots of resources in the area, but we want to keep this on point and directed toward information that you need to know so that you can be a better steward of the water out there. So with that, we have 2 speakers this morning from the Colorado River District. And the Colorado River District is a taxing entity. Part of your mill levy goes towards some of their support. They are awesome. They are the keepers of the water. They stay in touch with what's going on from a drought level. They come here every year at our water summit to educate us so that we know better about what's going on. I highly recommend that you tune into their board meetings. They have a great news drop on water issues, and you can see that weekly. It comes through your email. You can be as knowledgeable as you want to be. The resources are out there. But Raquel Flinker, she's been one of our top favorite speakers. She's the director of the Interstate and Regional Water Resources at the River District. She leads the efforts on basin-wide water supply challenges, interstate collaboration. And she's got a degree in engineering, environmental engineering, and also a master's degree in geosciences with a focus on hydrology. Everybody here is an engineer. I apologize ahead of time for that. They are not entertainers, but they are great speakers. But everybody's an engineer because water is complicated and technical, so it's not as easy as you think. It's not as easy as turning on your ditch and having water. It is much more complex than that. But Raquel is going to talk to us. We thought we'd start with the big picture. We wanted to press you right off the bat by talking about what's happening with the water supply. So if you would help me welcome Raquel to the podium, please. You want to use this? Yeah, okay.
Good morning, everyone. Sue, thank you so much for the warm welcome. And before we start, sorry, show of hand again, who's the first time in a water summit? Cool, great. Thank you for having me. So the plan, I'll be talking big picture, interstate, what's happening in the Colorado River Basin, and then I'll turn it over to my colleague, Caleb Foy, who will be talking about conditions here in the Gunnison Basin. Maybe, maybe not. There, thank you so much. So before I start, a little bit about the Colorado River District, and Sue mentioned a little bit, but we have been around since the 1930s. We have two parts of our mission. The first part is to protect and advocate for water users and water in Western Colorado. The second piece of our mission is to safeguard for Colorado the water that the state is entitled under the Colorado River Compact. So this second piece of our mission is focused on the big basin, Colorado River Basin. You can see here on the slide a map of our district. So Colorado, and then our district is shaded in light blue. Oh, there. And here you can see we have 15 counties, or part of 15 counties within our district. We are a local government. As Sue mentioned, we exist because of you. If you own property within our district, part of your property taxes funds the work we do. So we are here to support you. If you need anything water related, please feel free to reach out to me, to Caleb, or to anyone in our staff. We have a staff of engineers, of lawyers. We have a communications team. We have a policy team. Oh, it's moving. And this is a map of the Colorado River Basin. And importantly, here is where our district fits in this puzzle. The flows, the water that starts in our district is 65% of the natural flows of the Colorado River right below Lake Powell. So it's a very significant portion of hydrologic contribution to the system. If you've never seen this map before, no, we have 4 states in the upper basin: Wyoming, Utah, Colorado, and New Mexico. We have 3 states in the lower basin: Arizona, Nevada, and California. This map shows the 2 largest bucket of waters in our system, Lake Powell and Lake Mead. These are the 2 largest reservoirs in the United States, and they're a big part of the system. The Colorado River flows, and you probably know this by living here in Montrose. We don't get the exact same amount of water every year. It fluctuates quite significantly, and these reservoirs were built with an intention to buffer these high flows and low flows and deliver a more consistent water supply to really the lower basin, because the reservoir is not above us, right? It's downstream of us. Well, there are many complications that come with this system, and we'll talk more about it. There. Thank you. You're going to have to help me out here a little. We have never seen a year like 2026. And I cannot emphasize that enough. You're going to see throughout this presentation and Caleb's presentation what the conditions are. Sue mentioned 2002. If you were around in 2002, you saw some pretty dire conditions. This year is looking worse. Of course, we don't know what precipitation is going to be like rest of May and throughout the summer. But as of now, we have not, well, part of this story, we don't have to actually wait for the summer. And this is what this slide shows. The snowpack peaked 1 month early at approximately half of median. If you can clear. So this, I'm going to see if, there. Just to contextualize, this is a graph of snowpack in the upper Colorado River Basin through time. The water year starts October 1st. So this graphic also on the horizontal axis starts in October 1st, and it just shows you snowpack. And it shows the historical range of snowpack. The bottom of this graph, which here the colors are a little off, but it tracks somewhat with the red line. So the range is from the red to this blue. The median is here, April 6th at 16 inches of snow, okay? What happened this year? The peak this year was March 9th, a month early, at 8.9 inches of snow. And you can see how odd this year is. It's establishing the bottom of this graph. March was the warmest month of March that we have seen on record, and it melted most of the snow we had then. So this drop here that we saw in March, we were at half of the bottom of this graph. Half of the lowest snowpack we have seen historically is what we were seeing in March. It was terrifying, and I think it still is. So since then, April, we had somewhat of better conditions, but I guess everything's relative. And the snow kind of just moved horizontally. It was somewhat steady. And at some point in May, we actually even crossed the bottom of this graph. Oh, how great. Right? It's terrible. But compared to March, it felt like something good. And now we are still below. And we are at 1 inch of SWE as of yesterday. 17% of median. This is for the whole Colorado River Basin. Caleb's going to show something worse for the Gunnison. And it is, understand this because it just sets the stage of the dire conditions in the basin. And actually, just to point out, the green line here, this darker green, is 2002. So you can say, if 2002 in your mind was a terrible year, look at where we are compared to 2002. It's significantly worse. All right. So let's talk about inflows into Lake Powell, right? Because this snow melts and flows downstream. It ends in Lake Powell until it's released downstream and flows into Lake Mead. The Colorado River Basin Forecast Center projects inflows into Powell every month. And the Bureau of Reclamation takes these numbers and does some operational scenarios. The forecasted inflows into Powell, they continue to drop every month. And this graph is an illustration of that. November of last year, the expectation was that 8 million acre feet was going to flow into Lake Powell, dropped to 7, to 6.5, blah, blah, blah. In the more recent 24-month study, which is the study from the Bureau of Reclamation, it's at 3.3. That is the most probable scenario. There's a minimum probable scenario, which at times has been more reflective of reality. Minimum probable is at 3. Maybe you don't, for the new faces in this room, you're like, what does this even mean? What is 3 million acre feet? On average, for most years since Lake Powell was built, the amount of water that has been released from that reservoir every year has been over 8 million acre feet, okay? For you to be able to release 8 million acre feet, you have to have that coming in, or more than that, or on average that. What has happened in the last 20 years, 26 years, is we've seen a reduced amount of water in the river, and we've still been releasing 8 million acre feet out of Powell, for the most part. So we've seen that reservoir drop slowly but surely throughout the years. Well, you can see here, if you have 3 million acre feet going into Lake Powell and you're releasing 8, well, you're losing 5 million acre feet every year out of this reservoir. Its capacity is around 25 million acre feet. And we've just seen this play on repeat. Not as terrible as this year. For comparison, the flows into Powell in 2002 were below 3 million acre feet. So the projections are still better than 2002, but we likely, unless summer conditions are very different, will likely see this continue to drop. And with that, this is a diagram of reservoir conditions of the main reservoirs across the basin. Lake Powell is at 23% full at 5.6 million acre feet, so 5.6 out of 25-ish. We'll talk more about this elevation because it's quite crucial. Lake Mead, better, close to 8, 30%. Blue Mesa, if you've seen Blue Mesa recently, it does. Caleb will talk more about it, so I'll just leave it there. Flaming Gorge here in Wyoming is at 2.8 million acre feet, 75%. Remember this reservoir because it's being drained to prop Lake Powell, and I'll talk more about that. Blue Mesa is not being drained because there's no water. So, all right, so let's talk about elevations at Powell and why this is a problem. Until recently, the Bureau of Reclamation was targeting an elevation of 25 feet at Powell, this elevation here, which provides a 35-foot buffer on the power pool. What is the power pool? At 90 feet, if the water drops below that, you no longer can produce power out of Glen Canyon Dam, which is the dam that forms Lake Powell. When water is above the power pool, water is released through this dark blue tunnels, runs through the turbines, produces power. When water falls below power pool, the only way to release water out of Lake Powell is through this light blue tunnels, the river outlets. The river outlets were not designed to operate long-term. When they were operated in the late 80s, there was cavitation issues. The concrete, part of the concrete in these outlet works were corroded, eroded away and part of the sandstone below the concrete also came out. Since then, the Bureau of Reclamation has done some fixes. It did some lining because of additional issues a couple of years ago. But it's clear that this river outlet works cannot be operated for long-term use. Some could even say for short-term use. Because of that infrastructure constraint, the Bureau, until relatively recently, was trying to protect elevation 3525. But the conditions have been so that now the elevation they're trying to protect is, before I do that, yes. As of now, as of May 12th, Powell is at 3526, 1 foot above the elevation that the Bureau has tried to protect. And a slither of good news is that currently Lake Powell is at 3527. We went up a foot. Why have we gone up a foot? Because Flaming Gorge is being drained to prop up Lake Powell, and we've seen higher inflows into Powell. So now, because of the dire situation, the Bureau of Reclamation, is protecting elevation 3,500, only 10 feet above minimum power pool. Next slide. If the Bureau didn't take additional actions on how they operate Lake Powell and Lake Mead, by July or August of this year, this summer, it was projected that Powell would drop below minimum power pool. It would fall below 3490 this summer. And like I said, it poses many issues. The main issue is how do you get water out of the reservoir? Because of that, the Bureau is taking 2 actions. So only 2 ways, right, for you to get a reservoir to increase its elevation. Or somehow you put more water into it, or you take less water out of it, right? The Bureau of Reclamation is doing both of those things. It's releasing up to 1 million acre feet out of Flaming Gorge. So Flaming Gorge was close to 3 million acre feet. It's going to be close to 2 million acre feet by April of next year. And they're reducing Lake Powell release from 7.5 million acre feet to 6 million acre feet. Historically, never has there been a water year where 6 million acre feet of water was released out of Powell. Never. This is the first time. Actually, never we've seen a release less than 5.5 or 7.5. This is the first year that is going to drop to 6 million acre feet. And I don't want to be too pessimistic, but I do see a future where less than that might be required if we're going to protect this reservoir. This is great. This is beneficial for Lake Powell, right? We're going to be protecting minimum power pool with these actions. It does have negative impacts to Lake Mead because less water is going to be flowing into Mead, so Mead is going to drop. And one could say that that's a good thing, right? Lower Basin has been overusing water for gazillion years. They should finally see the impact to their reservoir, Lake Mead. So, below elevation 1035 at Lake Mead, power production is reduced by 70%. That is going to happen in the near future. And what's also going to happen is that Mead is going to drop below elevation 1025 at some point in 2027. Below that elevation, the lower basin entities that have conserved water into Lake Mead, called intentionally created surplus, cannot access that water. Part of this that I'm saying, there's a lot of uncertainty with it because we don't know what the guidelines to operate this system are going to be next year. Next slide. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple of slides. Before I go there, The Colorado River Compact of 1922 has a few clauses in it. One, it splits the river into two. It allocates 7.5 million acre feet of water to the upper basin, 7.5 to the lower basin. So the 3 million acre feet of water going into Powell, this is a good comparison. So the upper basin, in theory, gets 7.5 million acre feet of water every year. There's 3 million acre feet, and the lower basin gets 7.5. There's 3 million acre feet flowing downstream. Like, the system is just not what it was when this compact was written in the 1920s. So it splits the water into two. The other important thing the compact does, it states that the 10-year running average of flows below Lake Powell at a point called Lee Ferry has to be 75 million acre feet over 10 years. So on average, that is 7.5 million acre feet every year going by this point. The compact also says that if there's no surplus of water in the river, the upper basin is responsible for delivering half of the Mexico Treaty water. I won't go into too much detail about that. I'm happy to answer some questions, but that language has a lot of room for interpretation. The lower basin interprets that as, oh, the 10-year running average at Lee Ferry does not have to be 75 million acre feet over 10. It has to be 82.5 million acre feet over 10. That's what they believe. We don't agree with them, but that's what they believe. The problem, so here over time, what the 10-year running average is. So the blue line, 10-year running average over time. The 10-year running average was over 90 million acre feet until 2021, okay? We were releasing over 9 million acre feet out of Powell reoccurringly. Starting in 2021, things started to change. We're like, oh yeah, hydrology is changing, oh my God. So they started to decrease releases out of Powell. And like I said, 2026, first year, we're gonna see 6 million acre feet out of Powell. With a 6 million acre foot release of water out of Powell, the 10-year running average at the end of this water year is gonna fall below 82.5 million acre feet over 10 years. The lower basin has stated in public conferences and that if the 10-year running average falls below 82.5, they would litigate. We don't know what they're actually going to do, but there is a risk that they would litigate around this at some point in the near future. So what are the scenarios, though, moving forward if we're looking at the 75? Here are 4 different scenarios, but in a future where we see 6 million acre feet being released year after year out of Lake Powell in 2029, it looks like it's 2028, but 2028 is just a little bit above 75. 2029, we would fall below 75 million acre feet over 10. So even if we believe 75 is the number, we would drop below that if we have 6 million acre feet for the next few years. We would drop over it if we have 7 as well over the next few years at some point. And this poses a lot of risks and questions around what the future looks like for water use across this basin. That is, next slide. This is, I think, my last slide. If you haven't heard of this, the rules on how you operate Lake Mead and Lake Powell, they're called the 2007 interim guidelines. Those rules expire end of September of this year, which is when the 2026 water year ends. And the 7 states of this basin have been negotiating for the last 3-ish years on what the guidelines to operate these reservoirs are going to be starting in water year 2027. Unfortunately, they have not come to a consensus of what these guidelines should be. The negotiations are stalled. They have missed multiple deadlines on consensus. The Upper Colorado River Commission, which is the commission of the 4 upper basin states, has put out a recent public statement recommending, that the states try to find a mediator to help them come to some consensus. It's I think late in the game to do something like that, but I guess I think people think there's still hope, and I hope there's hope as well. But in the absence of a 7-state agreement, the federal government will have to put out rules on how to operate the system. And they are going to put out these rules this summer. There was a draft environmental impact statement that came out in January. We provided comments. A lot of people provided comments. And the Bureau is putting out a final environmental impact statement. We hear at some point in June with a record of decision in July. And we'll see what will happen from there. The lower basin has put out, maybe you guys have heard of this bridge proposal a couple weeks ago that, in my opinion, is a joke. Like, the lower basin says on their proposal, we'll reduce water usage by 3 million acre feet over 2 years. I'm sorry, 3 million acre feet over 2 years doesn't do anything. You needed 3 million acre feet per year, and likely more than that, depending on future conditions. And there are other issues with their proposal. But the truth is, it's, no one wants to. Well, I can speak for myself, and you probably have the same opinion of who wants to reduce their water usage, right? No one. And the lower basin has used over 10 million, close to 11 million acre feet out of this river every year, much above their allocation. They don't want to use less, especially when it's not a little less. It's like half, right? So I think this has created a lot of issues, and I think with that, I will turn it over to Caleb. Oh, Sue wants to introduce Caleb, I think.
Thank you, Raquel. All right, give Raquel. It's hard to deliver depressing news like that as classy as Raquel does, but I do want to remind everybody that the upper basin, which is us, we have never overused our allocation. That is correct. Never. We have an obligation to send it downstream. We have always lived within our means because we are directly tied to the hydrology. So if there's no snow, if there's no precipitation, we don't have the water. And the water user will talk about, we've cut back. I mean, every year we don't, for a long time, we've not started with 100% of our water. So I just want to make sure you understand that. And if you have a second house in Arizona, you may want to move. I told my cousin, I said, you better get out of there. I don't know. There's not going to be any water. It's going to be a fight. The same thing that's going on in this bigger picture is also what we'll start experiencing here locally because, as Raquel just said, nobody wants to use less water. But this is not the time to say, that's mine. It's the time to say, it's ours. And so we have to figure a way to work this out. So Caleb is our next speaker. Caleb is the Senior Water Resources Engineer with the River District. He provides technical expertise to West Slope water users and serves as the district technical expertise or technical lead for the Gunnison River Basin. He also is an engineer. This is our second one. So we have a lot of degrees here, Bachelor of Science in Environmental Engineering. He's also got a Master's in Civil Engineering. So please help me welcome Caleb Foy. And we fix the technical stuff.
Thank you, Commissioner Hansen. It's so nice to be here in Montrose. First, I'd like to recognize you all for being here. It is truly incredible to come out to a community on a Tuesday morning to talk about water and have a bunch of engineers talk to you about water. That's truly incredible. And frankly, I think it's a true testament to the importance of this issue. So I really want to thank you all for being here this morning. It's great to see you. Again, I'm Caleb Foy, Senior Water Resources Engineer at the Colorado River District. Before we get going here, let's see a quick show of hands after Raquel's really uplifting information. Who's ready for some more good news? All right, I see a few out there. Well, there is some good news. There's some breakfast out there still. I think there's a couple bagels and donuts, so please help yourself. Again, as Raquel pointed out, I will be talking with you this morning about local hydrology conditions here in the Gunnison River Basin. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Maybe. You can go ahead and forward the slide, please. All right, so I'd like to start off with this graphic from our friends over at the Colorado Climate Center. And what this graphic does is it really shows very succinctly kind of average annual conditions for the last 131 years as far as precipitation and temperature. So what you see here is we have temperature along the y-axis and precipitation along the x-axis. And each dot represents a year, that year's temperature and precipitation. And what I like to do is I like to break this graph into kind of 4 quadrants that generally tell you what the conditions were that year. So in the lower left-hand corner here, you have the cool and dry years. The lower right-hand corner, you have those cool and wet years. Upper right-hand corner, warm and wet years. And upper left-hand corner, warm and dry years. And as you can see, no surprise to anyone in this room, 2026 falls well in the warm and dry category. We're talking about 2026 being the first #1 warmest year out of that 131 years. And I should mention, this is from November through April. We haven't gone through the full water year yet, but it is November through April here on the western slope in Colorado. So again, 2026, first warmest, 6th driest out of 131 years. That's just truly incredible conditions, which, as you can imagine, will likely dictate the rest of this story about hydrologic conditions moving forward. You can go ahead and bump it forward. So other years that I like to consider in this graphic, just to give you a sense of where we are this year relative to some recent years. You have your 2018 up here, also warm and dry, 2012, warm and dry, 2002, notable for poor hydrology. It does fall in the dry side of the graph, but also the cool and dry quadrant. I did want to, these are all kind of similar, poor hydrologic years, warm and dry conditions. I did want to point out on the opposite end of the spectrum, we have year 2023. Well within that cool and wet category. We can only hope for a 2023 year coming up in the future. But for now, here we are, well within that warm and dry category. Next slide, please. So what has this done to the snowpack in the Gunnison River Basin? Raquel did a great job explaining this, which has certainly helped me set the stage. Really, this is a very similar graphic as you saw for the Upper Colorado River. This is specific to the Gunnison River Basin as a whole. It's based on 15 snow till sites located in the headwaters throughout the basin that help us determine how much snowpack we can expect or we are seeing in the high country. And as you can see, similar to Raquel's graphic, this black line is this year, 2026. For reference, I did put a couple other years on here, analog years. I guess I should point out first, the median conditions is this green line, but I also put on here 2018, which is the pink, and then 2012, which is this green, another shade of green, I guess I should say. So as you can see, we started off the year, it was kind of a late start to winter, but we started accumulating that snowpack. And really we were accumulating snowpack kind of along the minimum conditions throughout history. So basically, on any given day, we are roughly or maybe just a little bit above the minimum snowpack for that specific date. As Raquel pointed out, we hit early March and we just saw the snowpack absolutely get decimated by that extreme warm March that we had in the Gunnison and frankly across the entire western United States. That resulted in a precipitous drop in our snow water equivalent. April did come in. It was a little bit more of a seasonal April, cooler conditions. We saw some precipitation, which helped kind of keep, at least maintain the little bit of snowpack we had going into the beginning of April. And as you can see, we're now here in, starting in about the beginning of May, where we hit record low conditions. As Raquel said, not often do you celebrate hitting record low conditions, but at least you're not setting new record lows this year, and we've kind of followed that record low snowpack through the remainder of the season. Go ahead and forward, please. So today, that's what we're looking at. As she suggested, I have worse news for you. Here in the Gunnison River Basin, we're sitting at 0.4 inches of snow water equivalent. Those snow tell stations have nearly melted out in the high country, and that 0.4 inches of snow water equivalent is only 6% of the median snow water equivalent we typically would see this time of year. So again, just very poor snowpack or lack thereof this year. Go ahead, one more. So I do like to point out on these graphics the median peak, because the median peak or the peak snowpack really kind of tells us what we might expect as far as runoff timing and duration moving forward into the summer season. So the median peak that we typically see here in the Gunnison occurs on April 9th, 17.6 inches of snow water equivalent. Move forward, please. And then 2026, again, no different than the Upper Colorado. We saw the peak occur on March 9th, about a month early, or I guess exactly a month early, at 8.6 inches of snow water equivalent, 50% of that median, or just under 50% of that median. So as you can expect, when you see your peak snow water equivalent occur a month early at 50% of what it typically occurs at, it's going to have a dramatic impact to hydrology, stream flow, reservoir storage, which is now kind of where we'll go next. Next slide, please. I did want to show this graphic because it's pretty neat. So this is some satellite imagery taken, and this is the Upper Gunnison River Basin. This is the Aspinall unit right here, just for to get your bearings straight. But as you can see, this is satellite imagery taken from about I want to say March 7th, extending through the end of March. And what this graphic does is it truly shows us the dramatic, profound impact that warm stretch we had in March did, what it did to the snowpack. So not only did we see the snow water equivalent, or the amount of water in the snow, drastically decrease over that time, but as you can see from this graphic, the aerial extent of snow coverage, basically any low and mid-elevation snow, was completely melted out during this time frame, where you're only seeing snow left in the highest elevations as we approach that end of March period. Next slide, please. So what did that do to stream flow, or what has that done to stream flow thus far? So this, we promised Commissioner Hansen we wouldn't use too many graphs. It's kind of hard when you're an engineer, so I apologize. But this one's pretty good because it does show stream flow. And this is the Gunnison River at the Whitewater gauge, just there above Grand Junction. So what you can see here, the blue line is this year's stream flow at that gauge. So what are we seeing here? We're seeing that typically, I guess move forward, please, one slide. Yeah, I apologize. Some of the graphics didn't come through all the way. But what we can see here is, again, at that stream flow at this particular station, we would typically see a peak stream flow occur about 10,000 CFS, and that typically occurs on about May 23rd. Now, what have we seen this year? Well, this year we've seen far less of peak stream flow. The peak that's occurred at this location actually occurred way back in the beginning of April 3rd, which shouldn't be a terrible surprise given the fact that we had that warm March. And it occurred at near less than 25%, 2320 CFS. So as you can imagine, those warm conditions, low snowpack, really resulted in has resulted in low stream flow in the Gunnison, where we peaked at under 25% of where we typically peak, significantly earlier. We're talking 6-7 weeks earlier than we would typically see peak stream flow at that location. Just for some context, 2025, not a great year, but certainly compared to this year, we would take it. We saw a peak of just under 5,300 CFS on June 2nd. So just wanted to put that out there as, again, we're seeing that peak stream flow occur far earlier at a much lower rate than we have both typically and compared to last year. Next slide, please. So what has that done? Obviously reservoir storage is highly impacted by stream flow. So I did want to go around the basin and just provide some brief updates on storage. This is what we call a teacup diagram from the USBR classic diagram that helps us visualize how much reservoir storage we have throughout the basin. So we'll kind of start in the upper left here. I guess I'll start with the positive piece of news. Paonia Reservoir, 100% full. It's actually just drove by the other day. It's full and spilling. There's not too many reservoirs in Colorado that are full and spilling. So if you want to see one this year, Paonia Reservoir is probably your best bet. Moving over to Taylor Park Reservoir, Upper Gunnison, that's currently sitting at just over 67,000 acre feet, which is 63% full. Down here, Blue Mesa, again, poor conditions at Blue Mesa, which is why they elected not to make any of those DROA releases to prop up Lake Powell, given that, frankly, there's not much water in Blue Mesa to release. But it's currently sitting at 43% full at just over 350,000 acre feet. Moving down here in the basin, Silverjack, 58% full, just over 7,500 acre feet. And then finally, Ridgway. Ridgway is nearly full, 91% full, just over 75,000 acre feet. And I would say that's good to see Ridgway that full. It did go into, the last year had a high amount of carryover storage. So it was in good shape leading into this spring, which certainly helped it. I will say it's probably going to take about every drop of water above Ridgway Reservoir to fill it, to get that final 9% and fill it completely. I know this year, they've really not passed any water hardly through the reservoir. So as you'll hear from Steve later, he's had to really rely pretty much solely on his Upper Gunnison supplies coming through the Gunnison Tunnel, as basically they needed every drop of that water coming down the Uncompahgre to fill Ridgway Reservoir this year. Go ahead, next slide, please. So, Blue Mesa Reservoir. Let's talk a little bit about the operations at Blue Mesa Reservoir and what we might expect as far as elevations or how that's going to impact elevations in Blue Mesa Reservoir. So, for those of you who aren't familiar with Blue Mesa Reservoir, it is operated pursuant to a 2012 record of decision for the Aspinall unit. And what that record of decision does is it basically dictates targets that releases out of Blue Mesa Reservoir are meant to achieve. And those targets are really identified at the whitewater gauge on the Gunnison River there just south of Grand Junction. So for the way they set these targets are based on a hydrologic year type. What that hydrologic year type is it's based on the amount of flow that they're anticipating going into Blue Mesa Reservoir. So this year, pursuant to the record of decision, anything below 381,000 acre feet of inflow is considered to be a dry year type. And as you can see here, we're forecast 140,000 acre feet. So there's no question this year is a dry year. It doesn't take an engineer to tell you that. It's a dry year. So what's that mean for operations at Blue Mesa? Well, it means that the peak target at Whitewater is 900 CFS, which frankly isn't much of a peak, given that that's similar to the base flow targets of between 750 and 900 CFS. So again, Blue Mesa Reservoir is operated in such a manner where they're trying to achieve these flow targets at the Whitewater gauge on the Gunnison River. So where does that put us? Well, that puts us, this is from the Bureau here, and it's a forecast similar to what Raquel was showing for Lake Powell, but it's a forecast of elevations that we might see based on these anticipated operations pursuant to the record of decision and projected inflow to the reservoir. What we can see here is this blue line. This is the maximum probable forecast moving forward from that 24-month study from the Bureau. Frankly, for all intents and purposes, I think you can throw the max probable forecast out. You're probably wanting to focus more so on this green line. This is the most probable forecast. And again, this is an elevation in Blue Mesa Reservoir. green line being most probable, and then this red line being the minimum probable forecast. So if I were a betting man, I would guess that you were looking somewhere between the green and red line here as far as where actual elevations will be at Blue Mesa Reservoir as we proceed through the irrigation season. Go ahead and move forward, please. So I wanted to put this into some context because there are some critical elevations at Blue Mesa Reservoir. So I wanted to show you where these anticipated or forecasted elevations fall within some of those important elevations in the reservoir. So the top one here, this is the winter target of 7490. This is a great piece of news, or maybe one of the few pieces of good news is the target here is to always get Blue Mesa Reservoir below this level going into the next winter season, and that's due to wanting to prevent any icing issues that might result at 7490 and above. As you can see, great for us, we're going to have no problem meeting that target this year. Moving down, we see another, this target of 7470 feet elevation. That has to do with algae blooms in the reservoir. There was a recent study published by the USGS that really shows that elevations below 7470, we really start to see those harmful algal blooms occur in the reservoir due to shallow depths and warmer temperatures. So as you can see, we're currently below that elevation and we will likely stay below that elevation. So something to keep in mind as we move forward into the summer season, warmer temperatures, that those harmful algal blooms may become an issue at Blue Mesa, given these forecasted elevations. Moving down to recreation impacts that start occurring at 7450. And 7450 doesn't mean the boat, necessarily that things close, but they do start moving boat ramps to deeper water. They become marinas. And then below that, there are starting to be implications where you have to, maybe even the marina can't stay open. But as you can see this year, we're definitely going to be feeling some of those recreational impacts on Blue Mesa Reservoir due to low water elevations. This next red line is the 2022 minimum. So this was the minimum elevation that Blue Mesa reached in 2022. This is an important year because that's the year that DROA releases were made, I believe on the order of 30,000 acre feet out of Blue Mesa Reservoir to help prop up levels in Lake Powell. So as you can see, even that most probable forecast, we dip below that minimum elevation that we saw in 2022. And then last but not least, our power pool elevation at Blue Mesa is 7393 feet. And fortunately for us, all three of these forecasted projections do keep us above power pool. But with that being said, we are definitely approaching it. So certainly, with another bad year, power pool could come into play potentially at Blue Mesa Reservoir, which is certainly concerning given that's the elevation at which you can no longer produce power when you drop below that elevation. Go ahead and next slide, please. So I wanted to circle back and just look at severe drought. And again, this is something we're experiencing across the state. At least 82% of the state is classified as D2 or worse, which is D2 here is in orange, severe drought, red is extreme drought, and then this darker red is exceptional drought. So you can kind of think of these drought, they use a whole lot of parameters to determine this drought index, a lot of hydrologic parameters, precipitation, temperature, stream flow, soil moisture, things of that nature. They also use on-the-ground observations. So the people who put, the drought monitor index together, they're soliciting feedback from locals on the ground, actually describing what's going on the ground as far as drought conditions are concerned. So again, across the state, over 82% is severe drought. You can kind of think of severe drought as, if you're into probabilities, as kind of a situation where typically we're only seeing these severe drought conditions about 10% of the time. Although certainly frequently or recently it seems like it's more than 10% of the time, but typically those are, the top 10% dry conditions are severe drought. Extreme drought is about 5% of the time, that 5% worst drought would be extreme, and that leaves the exceptional to the 2%. So again, statewide, we're seeing 82% at least severe or worse. Now let's break that down by county. Delta County, we're seeing 98% of Delta County is currently covered in severe drought or worse. Gunnison County, 98%, similar to Delta, severe drought or worse. Now, moving down to Montrose, we might be thinking to ourselves, wow, only 48%, we must be doing good in Montrose County. I would be mindful, this is just severe drought and worse. The rest of Montrose County, the other 52%, is in moderate drought. So nothing to be super celebratory about, but definitely a little bit different than Delta and Gunnison County. And then finally, Ouray County, similarly, a little bit less, 28% of the county is sitting currently in severe drought. But again, don't make no mistake, the county is still feeling drought, and the rest of the 62%, or excuse me, 72% is moderate drought in Ouray County. Go ahead and next slide, please. So this is my last slide, just a forecast of what we might be expecting moving forward into the summer season. I'd like to try to leave the room with a glimmer of hope, and frankly, this might be it for this year. So what this is are seasonal outlooks, and these are put together by NOAA. And we see here the temperature outlook, maybe not terribly surprising, but it's currently for this July through September period. We're looking at leaning likely above normal temperature. So a 40 to 60% chance that we're going to be seeing above normal temperatures in that July through September time period here in the Gunnison River Basin. Now, here's the glimmer of hope, folks, so hold on. Precipitation. We're currently looking, and this again is through that July through September time period, at light leaning or likely above normal, 40 to 60% chance. So this is great. This is great news, right? This looks to me a whole lot like a signal from a good monsoon year, and we can sure hope that we see a good monsoon. Now, while I will say monsoons are great, every drop from the sky counts. That could be a drop less coming out of the ditch, and certainly super helpful. But make no mistake, a summer monsoon season is not going to save us. Frankly, that's not going to change the damage that's already been done by the really low snowpack, poor hydrologic conditions that we've seen this year. We always have to remind ourselves, we live in a snowmelt driven system. We have to live within nature's means. Nature provides through that snowpack over the winter season. And while, a strong summer monsoon season may give us a bit of a reprieve, again, every drop counts, especially when it comes from the sky. It by no means is going to change the fact that we're just experiencing these record low precipitation, record warm temperatures, and just really, frankly, record poor hydrologic conditions. So I apologize. I didn't do a great job giving you much more of an optimistic note. But again, seeing a little bit of a monsoon certainly will help. Hopefully you've all been taking great notes and have some good questions for us later, but I appreciate your time this morning.
Nice job. I asked Caleb to put a little humor in there. There's really not much humor that you can, garner from this situation, but hopefully we approach this with optimism, right? We do the best we can. So we've talked about the higher level. You kind of can see that that hydrologically there's not a lot of good news. Even if we have a monsoon, my question would be, how useful will it be? And even if we have a really robust season, how useful will that be for us? So, I never thought I would live in a location where I had to be like a meteorologist. I mean, almost the citizens of Montrose County and around, we almost have to know as much as others. We talk, about weather and about how to use water and how water flows. So it is interesting. It's really kind of cool. I did neglect to identify that we do have some elected officials here, and I'm not going to embarrass them, but just wave. We have the Ouray County commissioners who are really loving that they're only 20% in the drought. So that's the good news for you guys, and that's all we got. Commissioner Pond is actually here too, and I didn't see him earlier. If he's still here. Yeah, there he is in the back. Okay. Are there any, and there's some city council folks. We really, having elected officials who are policymakers be aware and be knowledgeable about this is really important. And we've been lucky to have many people attend that are elected officials over the years. So hopefully that has shaped water policy. Steve Pope is up next. Everybody knows Steve Pope, the manager of the Uncompahgre Valley water users. Steve has a 25-year career before he became the manager of the water users as in the Division of Water Resources. So comes to us with a full complement of understanding water, how water works. And if you've ever studied the map of the Uncompahgre Valley water system and learned a little bit about it, it is more complicated than you could ever imagine. And when the ditch riders come out and they know so much about our irrigation, and while for some of you who move from California or some other sophisticated irrigation areas, it might not look like it is much, but it is a very efficient system. And I just am always in awe of what these guys manage and how they get water to most of us. So anyway, with that, please welcome Steve Pope to the stage.
Thank you, Sue, and thanks for setting such a rosy picture for us, Caleb and Raquel. Yeah, what I wanted to talk about, and listening to their presentations, I think there was one or two really critical things to understand to set the stage for today. They talked about how critically low our snowpack is, but they're also referencing when these peaks are occurring, and I cannot emphasize this enough. As influential as the lack of snowpack is, timing is really critical, and it really is impactful to our system. So I want you to kind of keep that in your mind as we go through some of the slides today. What I wanted to do is lay out really where we get our water from, how we manage our water, and how we manage without the water. Oh, it's working if I step back here. Okay. Come on. There we go. There's a delay. There we go. So again, this is just a quick overview of our system. You know, it was established, the Gunnison Tunnel was constructed in early 1900s. Over the years, the system has developed, extending with all of the ditches and laterals. We have about 720 miles of canals and laterals in our system. So the southernmost portion of our system is up just off of Trout Road, above it actually Pagre Road, where the South Canal dumps in, all the way to Delta, both sides of the river. And we irrigate about 83,000 acres. All of our water rights, and we kept talking about, you know, the compact and things like that. All of our water rights are pre-compact, pre-1922, with the exception of some of our storage rights. But our direct flow rights, 1904 or older. So we have a very robust senior water portfolio on paper. On paper. In reality, things are different, and this is what we have to deal with daily. So where we get the majority of our water? Well, the Black Canyon, the Gunnison Tunnel provides our direct flow water right of 1,250 CFS. That's the right. The Gunnison Tunnel's capacity is dependent on the stage of the river there. Right now, we can squeeze about 1,100 CFS through it, 1070 to 1,100. That varies with the stage, what they're releasing downstream. That is our primary source of water this year. The other, I keep pointing at the screen, I don't know why I'm doing that. The other source of water up there, and I mentioned before, is we also operate Taylor Park Reservoir, which is in the Upper Gunnison. That pool of water and the reservoir that holds 106,000 acre feet, but Caleb says is at about 60%, 67% full right now, is kind of our buffer to ensure that we get our 1,250 through the tunnel. So that is somewhat compromised this year, but allows us to manage those flows. So right now we're looking at the 1,000 CFS, the max, or 1,100, the maximum we can get through the tunnel, is our sole source of water for the Uncompahgre Basin this year. Sorry. The Uncompahgre side of the system, we have direct flow water rights. So when this project was established, there are a lot of priority ditches in the system. When the Gunnison Tunnel was built, these ditches had the opportunity to kind of incorporate their waters into our system for shares. They became shareholders, and their water rights were transferred to the M&D Canal, which sits right up here out on their southernmost boundary. So we have a 306 CFS water portfolio of water rights at the M&D Canal that we can place a call on if we need to, although there is a no-call agreement with Ouray County. In addition, we have exchange water. So of this water that comes through the tunnel, a small percentage of it goes to Project 7, which is all of the municipal providers for the valley. It goes into Fairview Reservoir. This water is treated and gets distributed through Tri-County, the City of Montrose, Town of Olathe, City of Delta, Minokan, and Chipeta water districts. So every gallon of water we give them, they give us a corresponding amount in Ridgway Reservoir out of their account. So all told, we have 23,000 access to 23,500 acre feet of water in Ridgway Reservoir. It's comprised of 11,200 in irrigation, some of the project exchange water, and a small pool of water for the no-call agreement. Well, as you can imagine, and this is the only graph I put out here, Sue, this is the Uncompahgre side. So this is the Snowtell side at Red Mountain and Hydrology. It was pretty disheartening earlier this year because they took Hydrology, they just stopped forecasting it. They didn't even put it on the website anymore. It was dry early on. We are not seeing any snowpack at those sites. There was no snow at above 9,800 feet early on in the year. That March really decimated our system. Come on. And here's the evidence of that. So as I mentioned, we have our two sources of water. We have the Gunnison Tunnel, and then we have the flows in the natural flows in the Uncompahgre River. This is the Uncompahgre gauge right above our South Canal. This is this little bump here you see is when the Ridgway was on call and had to make some releases for out of priority storage for evaporative losses. But historical average, we're in that 300, 350 range. This was 4 CFS. That barely keeps the tops of the rocks wet. It doesn't. It's dusty. There was no inflow into the Uncompahgre. So this is what we're dealing with on that end. And again, timing. Timing is everything. We've historically seen these big diurnals. I think one of the things that's unique about our system is how many times we use and reuse water, and not just at the head gates, but capture it within our system. Our return flows go into canals. Our different laterals they go into drains, which we re-pick up. So, that's not good. So this is I would put this together yesterday. This is kind of our daily water balance. So yesterday, the Gunnison Tunnel diversions and that stellar inflow into the Uncompahgre basin, or out of the Uncompahgre, provided 1,076 CFS of inputs into our system. Now, if you look at just some of our major diversions out of the river and some of the tributaries, on paper, we're delivering 1,620. So that kind of gives you a hint of how many times we recapture that water and use it as it moves its way through the system. At the East Canal, we physically dry the Uncompahgre up. And then the Garnet Canal, which is downstream, is filled. Most of the Ironstone Canal, the East Canal, and the Garnet are solely return flows. Actually, if you do the math, some of the Selig was this year too, right now. So we're using this water again and again. And I think this next slide will really dictate that or illustrate this. This gets a little busy. This is a map, and we couldn't zoom out enough, but these are all of our turnouts. So, and they're stacked in there. There's thousands of them. But it's important, these are what we call merge points. And these are points in our system where we're recapturing water off of fields back into our laterals. So it's not just coming out of the river. It's coming out of the canals, off of people's property, back into the laterals. It doesn't even get accounted for there. And how we use that water is critical. And I keep going back to the timing component. So when we see a big change in practice and that runoff is impacted or that return flow is impacted, it messes with the timing. And it really throws an imbalance into our system. And up here on the upper end, if we have Montrose, most of the canals running full, that's the first use of water. But as we move into Olathe and further down toward Delta, it's this giant ripple effect of that imbalance starts to hit that system, and it comes down, and the larger production, the large agricultural production is down in this northwest corner. And they're the ones that take this huge swings in the bounce. They're the ones that go out and set their siphon tubes at 5:30 in the morning. They come back at 5:30 in the evening. They realize right around 8 o'clock, there was a bounce in the canal. They lost all their pressure, and they lost that day. And I cannot tell you, I don't know if is there any producers in here? Anybody that farms row crop, siphon tube, if you lose one day of production, watering, it's unbelievably impactful to your operation. Not to mention that being on a 50% allocation this year, I spoke to some of our larger producers. They're fallowing between 30 and 60% of their ground. Now, if you run a business and you got to take a 30 to 60% reduction in your gross revenue, actually, it's greater than that. We talk about insurance. A lot of the producers carry preventative planning insurance. In order for them to qualify for that, they have to prep the ground. They have to put fertilizer on the ground, and then they have to go to the insurance company and say, I have no water, which they don't even get their basic cost covered, especially when diesel's $5 a gallon, and those tractors burn several hundred gallons a day. So I keep pounding this into our staff's head. I mean, we work for the agricultural community. If you feel that we work for the residential community, I apologize. We do not. We work for the ag community. This system was developed as an large-scale agricultural irrigation system. It's changed over the years. We have growth. We have smaller properties. And it's really impactful. And that's some of the stuff that we're trying to do when we're at 50%. How do we manage redevelop our system to accommodate for this type of stuff? So these are some of the challenges. Again, starting at 50%, and we might go down from there. This is as good as it's going to get this year. Pumping. Everybody's kind of read Facebook, listened to their neighbors. We have taken a very aggressive position on pumps in our system for a number of reasons. Pumping for residential irrigation, small shareholders. Some people have a half a share, 1 share, 5 shares. A share is, I think it's very important to understand here, we have to look at instantaneous flow versus volumetric. So what happens is I apologize, this is a little faint. 1 share of our mesa soil is equal to 0.02 cubic feet per second, or 9 gallons per minute, at 100%. So we're at 50%. So let's just take that 9 and cut it to 4.5. How many folks have an irrigation pump and a rainbird system that can run on 4.5 gallons a minute? I can tell you exactly how many have it. So what happens is, over the 24-hour period, you're not taking more than your 0.02, your 9 gallons a minute. But instantaneously, when you turn on your lawn pump and it pumps between 35 and 80 gallons a minute, and you multiply that by 1, maybe 2,000 lawn pumps in the area, it puts this enormous suck on the system that by the time we get down to Olathe, these guys are getting up in the morning and everything looks good, and 3 hours later, that canal is bone dry. And it's how we manage that. So we're working through the solutions for the shareholders. Come on. Up. I went too far. So we have 3 different types of pumps in our system. We have our annual contracted pumps, which we sent out a letter earlier this year. We recognized early in the season that we were not going to be able to operate. And the contracts read, if we are at 80% or less, they become void. We knew we weren't even going to start our system at that. So we sent a letter saying that if you've already paid, we will give you a credit for next year. If you didn't want to pay, then we just have to start the process next year for contracted water. These are not shareholders. These are annual contracts that are utilizing some section of shares that the water user still maintains control of. I want to make one other quick point too, because everybody throws this around. I have water rights. I pay for my water rights. Unless you have priority water from some irrigation company other than us in this valley or in this room, nobody that has UVWA shares has a water right. We don't even own the water. The federal government still maintains control of that water. Your shares are just in the company. So we have these extra shares that we can reallocate or contract out annually. And again, it's designed to, if environmental conditions allow. So those contracts were immediately canceled this year and credited to next year. We're hoping we see improved hydrology. The second one is folks who are pumping their shares directly from a UVWA lateral or canal. This is where we get back into the timing issue. If you have a half of a share and you're entitled to this time of year would be, 3 gallons a minute, 2 gallons a minute. We need to know how you're metering that. Because again, it is very impactful to our system. So we're working with the shareholders, and some of the options are, we can divert it, ideally the subdivisions take it through a head gate. They've built maybe a small pond to allow that to be your re-regulating reservoir where you can pump out of in a more uniform manner. Unfortunately, a lot of the development around here, they gave you a head gate, and then they said the subdivision has this many shares, and they walked away. So the people that happen to be living immediately adjacent to a lateral say, I'm just going to throw my pump in there. Well, we're sending your shares are at a head gate, not in that lateral. So when you're pumping out of that lateral, I'll be quite frank, you're stealing a farmer's water. And we're taking a very hard line on that. So we're working with the shareholders to develop systems to measure. Ideally, if you can get the water out of our canal at that fractional rate, and then what you do with it once it's outside of the canal, it's not as impactful to us. It's just those instantaneous demands. Typically, everybody waters between 5 and 8 in the morning or 8 and 10 in the evening. And that's when we see those huge bounces. A lot of it's information. This system's been around a long time. This is the first year we've ever hired anyone specifically to handle our pumps. We're finding a lot of them where a lot of folks came from somewhere else and they said, well, I got a canal running in my backyard. What's the harm? Those pumps are coming out immediately. We have an easement through there. We are pulling them. We're working with the folks that have shares. We're notifying them. This one, we're going to pull it. We're pulling them daily. So that is the challenge where we're facing. I mean, we have to make it through this season. I don't see, with the whole pumping thing, it's become very aggressive this year. But I don't see it, even if we have an average year next year, I don't see it changing. This is where we're working with. So we have to think about how we can get the water, again, going back to the timing, how you can get that small amount of water out of the canal system and have the availability to use it at your desired pumping rate. But we can't have people pulling from the canals without a measured amount that is commensurate with their shares. It really throws our system into imbalance. And we see it more on these dry years. An interesting statistic, sunny day versus a cloudy day. That's usually about a 40 CFS swing in our delivery. When we talk about the limited snowpack this year, I haven't run the numbers yet, but we have some rough estimates. It takes roughly 14,000 acre feet of water just to put water in the canals. Not put it on a field yet. It's just to get them up to a level where people can take the water. So that's, of our 20 or 30,000 that was in Ridgeway or the Uncompahgre drainage, if we were solely relying on that, half of that would go right to just filling the canal, wouldn't really be used on any kind of beneficial use for irrigation. So that is water that eventually makes it back to the stream, keeps the springs going, feeds the river down in Delta, things of that nature. So, we've used the term unprecedented. This is, 2002, our system went through similar changes, but I look at the growth that's happened in this community since 2002. I think back at the farmers there that were fallowing between 30 and 60. How many of those farms are now subdivisions? Subdivisions don't fallow. That's the reality. And so we're trying to help navigate that. So I say we historically said that the Gunnison Canal or Gunnison Tunnel will service our system at 50%. We're close. I don't think all of our corn's in yet. We're still planting. But every day we're right on that edge of not having any water in that lower portion, the lower valley, the northwest portion of our system there we go. In this corner, we really struggle at the tail end, and that's where all of our high value crops are grown. So I hate to be more of a downer than Raquel and Caleb have, but I just wanted to lay out the reality. And Sue, I'd be happy to take any input.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, we had some volume brought in. So as you leave, if you're kind of sad now, you can, no, I'm kidding. So we have one more speaker, and then we're going to completely open it up for questions. I'm sure you all do have some questions. I do want to share that hearing and learning about water and irrigation and all of that as a county commissioner, you really see the impact of what subdivisions do to the irrigation water. And I mean, we've created a perfect storm because people are moving in here. We have subdivisions, and a subdivision is right on the a canal backs up against that subdivision. Just because it runs across your property or near your property doesn't mean you get to use it. And that was a hard concept to really understand. But from a land use perspective, it really makes it complicated because as you develop, and we don't have irrigation rules, so we're looking at a community that going forward may have to make some significant changes in how they manage irrigation and how we look at it, because we've really made through development, we've really made it complicated for the agricultural producers to actually get water to their land. Add on to that, we have spraying and things like that. And so as subdivision encroach on those areas for farming, it also creates some conflict. So, we have a perfect storm for a really uncomfortable situation, and hopefully we can navigate that best together. So are you guys teeing up? So Scott, we haven't, how many of you live in the city? Raise your hand. Okay. Good. I'm really glad to. And how many of you live in an HOA? Okay. I'm sorry. You're probably managers of an HOA. We did a HOA conference last year. Maybe it was last year or the year before last year. I never realized how much conflict goes on in HOAs, but good luck for that. And I'm guessing that you're really challenged right now with some of the water usage and what people want, and they want more, and they have a really nice Japanese ornamental thingy that they put in, and they really love it, and you have to water it. And so I am guessing that you're dealing with a lot right now. So you have my sympathy, because I think that, as I think Raquel started out by saying, nobody wants to use less water. And again, this is where we all are in the same boat, and we have to work together. So Scott is also an engineer, because we didn't want to have any speakers today that weren't engineer people. But he specializes in municipal infrastructure design, geotechnical analysis and design, and construction management. He has a Bachelor of Science and a Master in Engineering degrees in Civil and Environmental Engineering from Utah State. So collectively, we have it all covered here. I've been wanting to steal Scott forever. I think he's working with him is really awesome. He knows his stuff, always answers any questions that I have, and I think the city is lucky to have him. So please help me welcome Scott Murphy.
Thank you, Sue, and thanks for having us, of course. So I'm going to drill in a little deeper on the municipal drinking water side of things. What all of this means for us who drink water. Anybody here drink water? This might be the year to switch to beer, I'm hearing. So I'll focus on our water supply, kind of a reminder for anybody new to the area where our water supply comes from and how that system works. We're extremely fortunate to have a lot of the infrastructure we do and the partnerships we do to make all of that work. And then, I'm speaking on behalf of the City of Montrose, but as Steve mentioned, we're all part of Project 7 for the municipal drinking water side of things. And so we are truly all connected at the hip. We work together on all of these things. Everything that happens in one system impacts the other. They are operating in kind of a similar fashion. So, I'll talk about some city-specific things, but I think we do have representatives here from most of the other water districts. And if you guys want to chime in, feel free. And then I'll dive into kind of what it means for us as customers, what it means for conservation and promotion there, some of the things we're taking as a city, and also I was going to go over some new regulations that are coming down at the state level, which we think, usually new regulations are hit or miss. We think there's actually some good stuff coming, and that has already come. So I'll dive into that. So first is where our water comes from. I'll come over here to the graphic. So this graphic is produced by Project 7, which is our treatment plant. So as you drive out towards the Black Canyon, you'll see a couple of tannish tanks on the right side of the road there. That's the Project 7 treatment plant. The way the water gets to that plant is actually our physical water comes from the Gunnison River, and Steve kind of hit on this. They divert into the Gunnison Tunnel, fill Fairview Reservoir, which is relatively small, just kind of buffers those flows, and then from there into the plant. From there into a main 24-inch distribution pipeline that goes to all of these various entities. So each of these colors is a different water district. Here's City of Montrose here, Chipeta, Minokan, Tri-County, Olathe, and Delta, all the way there. So a very robust, very complicated system, but I think good complicated. It's it's a lot of, world-class infrastructure serving our valley. And we are thankful every single day for everybody who is a part of this, who's, a lot of people in this room, water users. We wouldn't have a drop to drink without them. And we're all tied in this together, but Ridgeway is where our physical, or our, paper water rights sit. So like Steve mentioned, when they divert a gallon of water to us, it's kept track of with the state, and they keep track of the gallon of water then available for them to release into the system for both, irrigation upstream of where the South Canal and Gunnison Tunnel come in, but also other users, and just add more water into the overall system on a good year. Not so much the case this year, but let's see. I think that's all I had to say on that. I took notes of things I wanted to make sure to hit on, so I want to make sure I don't miss. I will also say that Ridgeway is physically operated by Tri-County Water. They hold the original, or they worked on the contract when Ridgeway was built with the federal government, and then all of these entities have agreements with Tri-County Water to distribute those various water shares between the municipal users. What that means, though, is they kind of have say in how the dam operates. They hold operations meetings with all the stakeholders, including water users, to kind of determine how to find that sweet spot in operating that dam, to get as much storage in there as possible, maximize power production, and kind of meet all the various stakeholders' needs. For me, it's really encouraging. It's a lot of governments working together, and working together well. It works. And functional government can be hard to come by these days. And yeah, we're proud to be a part of it. I know Sue said try and go less graphics. I'm sorry. I get out of them eventually, but oh yeah, this way. Okay, we're getting close to the end of the graphics. You've seen the snow water equivalent stuff. This one's kind of cool. This is put on by Tri-County as part of the Ridgeway operations of when the snow hit. So this is a typical year of snowpack within the Uncompahgre Basin. So this is above Ridgeway Reservoir. And just to kind of show how and when it went sour. So this is what actually occurred by month. So this is snow accumulation by month and percent of average. October stunk. March, we all heard about March. March was bad. But even the others, not great. And so, that's how we got to where we're so far from the other. And I'm going to quickly move off that so get through the graphics. Okay, I think this is the last one. So this is also produced by Tri-County with their consultants in the Bureau on the Ridgeway operations. So the great news, that's why they put me at the end, is, Ridgeway did start the year pretty high. So this black line is content of the reservoir, ties to this axis here. And so Ridgeway started the year relatively pretty good. Came in, have runoff, even though the runoff is meager. And this, this shows a little gap. We're all crossing our fingers, pretty hopeful that Ridgeway will fill this year. Usually happens around the 4th of July, and then starts to drop. But even at the end of the year, still sitting not in a bad place by the forecast. This bottom line here is inflows and outflows. So obviously when stuff coming in is bigger than what's going out, your reservoir is rising. And then after you peak with spring runoff, you start getting the larger demands on the system for irrigation and municipal use, and the reservoir starts dropping. But what Ridgeway has going for it is it's a relatively small reservoir compared to the size of the basin. So it is a little easier to fill than most, obviously far easier to fill than Lake Powell. On a typical year, we're operating in this upper portions of the reservoir. The pools that are allocated to municipal water and irrigation water, are down here. And so usually we're above those and can pretty quickly, sometimes even at the beginning of the water year. So even before runoff occurs, those allocations are there. Again, we're very fortunate to have that great of infrastructure serving our community and, the partnerships and everything that it takes to do that. Okay, oh, thank you. You got it. Oh, dang, there's another one, sorry. Another chart. So, what does it all mean for us? So with our full allocation, the questions we've been getting are you going to do mandatory restrictions? It is a very tough year, but with our full allocation, we are not mandating cuts. A couple reasons for that. We don't feel a basis to when we have the full allocation, but I wanted to kind of highlight this chart here. So, this is City of Montrose water usage, not all municipal, or not all the various entities, but City of Montrose water usage versus, total valley diversions. We're a pretty small piece of that, but in the summer, a relatively large piece of that is outdoor watering. So 2/3, pick your graphic. There's all kinds of ways to slice the pie, but generally about rough math, 2/3 of water used in the summer on our system is for outdoor watering. And we think that's a very great place to focus to help do our part. Literally every drop counts. We don't want to be in a place where we're saying, oh, we're a small piece of the pie, we don't care. Let's not do our part. I don't eat lettuce, I don't need water. We can't. We all drink water. We all have things we need to do with that water. We all eat food. So everybody's got to carry their weight, and that's something we're trying to promote this summer because this is a good area to focus to reduce where we can do our part to reduce water usage within the valley. So I think I had another point on that one. And I think the other agencies as well. So generally, none of the Project 7 entities, the City of Delta, Olathe, all the different water districts, none of them are doing mandatory water restrictions, but we are doing a strong push for conservation. And another thing to keep in mind on that, so every bit of water conserved, if you're a municipal water customer, every bit of municipal water saved stays in Ridgeway. And so what that's doing is hedging against future short years because the higher Ridgeway is at the end of the year, the higher it is going into the following year, the better we can weather back-to-back poor years, which, long range forecasting is not good. And the track record of the last 25 years is not good. Generally, we just see continued higher and higher risk of less favorable hydrology. If you're on a irrigation system for your lawn, which a lot of the kind of larger estate style neighborhoods are in the fringe of town, then when you get into the county, if you're on an irrigation system and you can water your grass less or not water your grass this year, even better, that water is staying in the water user system and is truly getting used by irrigation. That water gets used multiple times as it goes down through the system. So if you're on an irrigation system, you can forego, you're helping your fellow neighbor, agriculture, and also the larger system. So, if that water stays in the system, even if you're at the low end and it's not getting used by Uncompahgre Valley water user system, it's still water in the Colorado, which is keeping pressures off of, targets off of the backs as they start looking upstream for all the various water shortages that are here. So I think that's that on that one. So I'm going to move on to water conservation. A lot of this is pretty common sense, I think, but I will spend some time on it because there's some that we get asked about or people that are new to the area that don't understand that water is limited. What can I do? So I'll spend the next couple slides on, how can I do my part as either a city water customer or as if you're on irrigation water. We did stand up a webpage, citymontrose.org/drought, and you'll see a lot of promotion for that throughout the summer, where we have a lot of this information as well, and some of the deeper dives on what all of this means. But some of the simple things, if it rains, just picture my kid when it was raining, skip a cycle. Some of the phones will do it, or some of the new apps will do it automatically. Hit a little button so it does that. It senses if there's rain at a rain gauge in town, it'll automatically skip a cycle like those Ratio ones. Or you can, if you have an app, just skip one or two. Or, if it's an old-fashioned controller, just, put it on standby. It goes a long ways, so, and we see it. So, if we get into the monsoon season, we have even one rain a week, and you have one less watering cycle a week, that can be 30%. That's not small. 30% of what is a large portion of the summer water usage. The other word, BREEN, is the new green. I did not make up that word. I don't know if Jason Ward is here. I stole that from him. Brown green is kind of the new cool grass. This is my son sliding into third on our BREEN lawn. That used to be grass too. I'm proud of that. That's no longer grass. I hate grass now. Wish I wouldn't have planted it, but you know, less grass stains. And I found if you don't water it as much, it doesn't grow as much. You don't have to mow it as much. You win twice. If you're a city water customer, if you just Google City of Montrose Aquahawk, you can sign up for this free service. What it is, it's all of our system sends usage data out in 15-minute intervals back to our metering system. And the beauty of that is it's all ties into this Aquahawk system that can send you alerts. So if you have a break on your system, especially like if you're out of town and you don't know it, it'll send you a text alert of like, hey, something weird went on. Like it can kind of see what typical uses are. And if something comes out of the ordinary, or it can pick up if something's just building, which usually leaks start small and just get bigger and bigger on that baseline, it can usually detect that, send you a link so that obviously you don't flood your basement, but also to save money. You know, nobody wants a leak on their system. But you can also go in, and this is the like sad wake up call part, and see what your water usage is in real time. And so before you get your bill. And so you're seeing, and you can see, and it'll put dollar amounts to it. So you water your lawn and you're like, holy crap, that costs $5. I just gave up lunch this today because I was trying to be good with my budget, but I spent $5 on a lawn watering. How about I do that once a week? So it just kind of helps open your eye on really where those costs and water is going. And it's a free service. I don't think the others have that. Their systems meter differently. We're lucky that our system is tight enough that we can get it all by radio in real time. Some of the other providers, they're more rural, don't have that luxury, but there is a free service available. And then another one we talk about, it doesn't really matter, is not watering in the middle of the day. So in this, you know, obviously to Steve's point about on irrigation systems doing the right things to buffer. So, you know, this is mostly geared towards if you're on the municipal water system, most people are watering at night, and that's great. Our tanks can do that buffering for you. And so if you can water at night, don't water during the heat of the day. A lot of that water gets lost to evaporation. Don't water in high winds. A lot of that water just blows onto your neighbor's property who may or may not want it. And so one of those things, like for the bit we are using, we want to use it as efficiently as possible, make sure we're not wasting it unnecessarily and just putting it into the atmosphere. And then I thought Steve was going to say it, so I'm going to have to steal his joke. No matter how long you water the pavement, it will not grow. It took me a couple days to drive around and find this one. Now, thankfully, this is not a City of Montrose sprinkler, but you know, if you see stuff like this, if you see it on a city system, please let us know. We have an app that you can report those kind of things. It creates a direct work order right to a parks worker to go fix it. Errant sprinkler heads do occur, we get it, but just try and get them fixed as quickly as possible. If you have leaks, get them fixed as quickly as possible. Again, you know, if you are going to use the water, we want it to go into the right place as efficiently as possible. And I also kind of say, like, if you're planning a new lawn, think about turf. And I'll go into some of the state stuff too, which has some implications on that. But, you know, xeriscaping, some people gave it a bad rap. It doesn't have to look like Arizona cactuses and lizard statues. You know, this is a drip system here. You know, that's xeriscaping technically. It's a lot less turf. Still looks nice, still cools your yard. You know, think about the water or the turf in your yard. You know, kind of the old way used to be wall-to-wall turf on the entire yard, and that's the only thing that's pretty. It's not really the case. Most grass in a front yard doesn't get used. Most grass in side yards doesn't get used. If you have kids or grandkids, you need a place to play. You know, make a patch in your backyard, but don't put turf where you don't need it, because you don't need to. It's a waste of water. So, you know, that really applies for people that are working on new stuff. Just be conscious of that. There are really great resources out there too. So if you go to any of the local nurseries, you know, they kind of claim they only carry stuff that you can't kill. That I don't believe that, but that works in our environment. Generally is kind of lower water use. We have a great botanic gardens here in town. They're a great resource, volunteers there that you can check in with them, and kind of just a place to get started. You know, this is actually my yard, admittedly, but I'm not a landscape architect, but I just went and talked to them and said, hey, what's some cool stuff that works? And plopped it in the yard. You know, it's as simple as that. But So I think that's it on those slides. Yeah. Okay. So our last slide here is, I want to talk a little bit about some of the things the city is doing. So we do have a renewed focus on conservation. We want to be as good a stewards as we can with the water. A lot of our watering is public rights of way or park areas. So same deal, we're trying to do everything we can to make that as efficient as possible. I will note, we try and water at night for the most part. In some cases, either due to ditch stuff or some of our parks are just so large that by the time you get through all the zones, you're starting over again. So some of that watering, I think, especially like Sunset Mesa, you do see some during the day. It's not that we're not trying, it's just some of those you are limited, and maybe even some people have some of those systems. But we are on water users percentages as well. So some of our parks are irrigation water. We're in the same boat for the allocations there and making do with what we have. Alan and Trey are here from Cimarron Canal Company. They're excellent partners in a lot of our system. This is actually a picture of Cerro Reservoir right here. Cerro is owned and operated by the city. It generally stays full, and so it's an emergency water backup in the event of a tunnel disruption or major tunnel maintenance required, where we could get water down to Project 7 if needed. But when it's full, the shares that we use to fill that as part of the original Cimarron Canal Company, Alan works with us to lease those to farmers. And so on yours where we don't need them, we're able to put those out to irrigators, and we're really thankful for that. It's obviously mutually beneficial for their system and for us. So again, really proud and grateful for the partnerships we have to make all of this work. You'll see an advertising campaign this summer, so a lot of those messages around conservation, we'll try and those are all partnerships with all of the other water distributors, water users, the county. You'll see kind of a joint messaging campaign just to help people, educate people on conservation, water-related issues, fire, things of that sort throughout the summer. Social media, I think we're doing some banners. You'll see some ads going on to just try and help people understand why it matters and why it is good to do the right thing and be a good steward of what is a very finite resource for all of us. We are still watering our parks. And years where we have our full allocation, we still water them as public spaces, kind of that they're not just being used for one person. They are, community assets. We don't, especially turf fields and stuff, if they get too dry and beat down, they're really hard to recover. We feel those are important parts of our community. But if we get to a point where we don't have allocations, that's the first thing that gets cut are our parks. We're also working on water resource master planning. We get a question a lot about how are they letting in new houses? We don't have enough water. It's a very fine line to walk as a community. So, we need housing. Anybody who has kids who are trying to buy a house right now, it's impossible. And it's an important part of our community. I mean, all of these things have to work. We work for slow, sustainable, smart growth. And that's where part of this comes in. So making sure that as the growth occurs and the land use patterns kind of develop in the way that they do, that we have enough municipal pool to serve those neighborhoods and that they're developed in a smart way. The answer isn't, in our mind, no, stop it all. That has big implications for housing costs, just again, the overall vitality of our community. So we want to do it in the right way. We are using about 40% of our allocation within the city of Montrose, not including Cerro. Cerro's an additional on top of that. And so, we do have plenty of room to grow. There is a lot of uncertainty in the water world, obviously, though, and so it's something we watch very closely and are, continually adapting to. We're able to keep on the trajectory we're going. There's some communities that have had to stop new taps, and those things get pretty Western when that happens. So last two things I want to talk about are turf. So the city, as part of our water resources master planning, is looking at opportunities to reduce the city's turf in areas where it doesn't make sense. There's some places it does make sense. Sport fields, kind of dedicated park areas. There's some places it doesn't make sense. A lot of rights of way. The one that comes to mind is like when you come to town, you have this long swath by the airport. That's actually on city water, strangely. The hard part is anybody who's tried to do this in their yard, getting rid of turf is also expensive, turns out, because you got to replace it with something or it's just going to look like garbage. So we we understand the importance of these to the kind of aesthetics of our community. Want to do these things in a smart way. So you'll see a lot more coming out on kind of focus areas. These are all multi-million-dollar projects usually, of replacing some of these turf things with more responsible use that are still aesthetically pleasing. So you'll see a lot of that over the coming years coming out, and a lot of that will include public engagement, because it's kind of, we want to do what the community wants to see and how they want us to use these resources. And then the last is state turf regulations. So there's been two major bills that have come through the state House and Senate. One of them is in place and already effective. Is they banned non-essential turf on all commercial projects. We think this is great. So like if someone's, and within rights of way. So if someone's coming in, and it went effective, I think, spring of this year, or January of this year. But, like say a bank or a, grocery store or something's coming in and they want to put turf in their landscaping, this prohibits that. We've adopted those things. We have to, but we quickly adopted those, so they're in our codes so that we have the ability to enforce them. And so it's just keeping turf out of areas where there shouldn't really be turf. They still landscape them. They have to landscape them by our code, but makes it so it's not just Bermuda blue by default and all the water use that comes with it that not a single kid is playing on. Park's a good place for grass. A bank, maybe not, and I'm just picking on banks, but pick any given commercial project. There are some additional too that are extending that into multifamily buildings and then even into residential. The residential piece has not been enacted yet, the timelines for the residential pieces. The state gave a couple of years on those. So you'll see some community engagement on that. It's really interesting. The state says you have to limit turf on new residential. So existing residential, grandfathered in, new residential, but it doesn't specify exactly what. It's really interesting too. So statistic I heard, maybe Colorado River District can fix or set me straight if I got this wrong, but generally like a xeriscaped lawn in Phoenix would use a similar amount of water as a turf lawn here. We still think so that you see a lot of turf reduction or turf limitations, like no turf at residential in like Phoenix, Vegas, things of that sort. We don't think that's the answer. It's probably going to be like, maximum of 30% of your gross lot area or something like that can be turf or something. So to try and limit that, there is places for turf, but we just got to do it in a smart way. So long way of saying, sorry, I got a little winded there, is we don't know exactly how the individual residential is going to look, but there will be something coming in conformance with the state regulations. And the really good news on that piece, independent of that, is we are seeing, because we have individualized water data for all the various subdivisions and houses, we're seeing most of all new residential development is not doing the wall-to-wall turf, which was kind of the practice a long time ago. We aren't seeing a lot of dedicated irrigation systems, which sound great. Let's put them on irrigation systems, but you do that, usually you're going to create problems for Steve, and people are going to put in more turf because it's cheap water. With the price of water doing what it's doing, a lot of people don't want to maintain that kind of, there's a cultural change happening. A lot of the newer neighborhoods we're seeing a lot less grass going into them. So I think it's happening naturally anyway. We hope that continues, and, we'll kind of set up our regs to match. So I think that's the last of what I had to say. At the end of the day, we want to be a part of the solution. We are all in this together. And we're very appreciative for all the partnerships and everything that enables all of this to work. So thanks for having us.
Very good. All right. I don't think any government likes to mandate anything, and the county is not either. But we are being water wise with our own properties, like for instance the South Campus, which will be a building we won't be using in the near future. Well, at least in the next year. We'll probably let that lawn just go because it doesn't need to be green. We're not going to have that building in the future. We'll be living in North Campus. We've also put up some signs so that people understand that if at the courthouse we just have a little bit of lawn, but we don't want it to die, so we'll be watering it once a week or whatever the allocation is for that. But I think what we want to leave this message with is let's just be wise about our water. My husband's sitting in this room, and I have to tell you that I have been haggling him about his shaving for how long have you been married? 39 years. Like, do you really have to run the water consistently when you're shaving right? Does it? Or can you just like have a bowl of water? Yeah, he says, yes, he has to. So we have differing views on conservation within this marriage. But nonetheless, it is important for all of us to think about it. I think that what I'd like to leave you with before I pass it on to my partner is that I think we all have to adapt and we all have to be positive. I mean, in the beginning of the Water Summit's early years, I always started with water is for fighting and whiskey is for drinking, and we all know that. But this is a different day, and it's really serious at this point where we really have to try to work together. So we're going to do questions around. We're going to do a robust panel here with Kirsten in charge of that. But there are 2 information sheets out front, one on how to conserve with water, so some suggestions if you're interested in nabbing those. And then one on fire. And I don't, this isn't the fire summit, but I do want to underscore that drought leads to fire. And so there's some clearing out your areas and debris, and even calling the West Region Wildfire Council if you need help securing your area and being wise about that. We'd like to prevent anything that we can prevent. So with that, I'm done editorializing and lecturing. I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Copeland. Here you go. Thank you.
All right, so we are going to have a panel discussion. I do want to reflect back and thank our speakers again. We were lucky enough to get the big picture all the way up at the compact level, into the basin, into the county, into the city. And I think that was by design. We kind of wanted to put the whole picture together because we are impacted by that whole line of things. So we're very fortunate to have them. I hope you guys have some great questions. We're going to go ahead and after I'm done, real briefly, have them take a seat over here, and then I'll have the questions and I'll pose those to them. So if you haven't written something down and you would like to pose it to the panel, please do that. The other thing that I wanted to say is that thank you guys. Thank you all for being here. We have the titles in terms of community leadership, but the community leadership is in this room. You are the folks that are integrated into your different communities, into neighborhoods, into different irrigation user districts, HOAs, as Sue alluded to. And what you learn here, this information and carrying it back to your circles, is what really makes a difference, and all of us working in collaboration like that. Steve touched a lot on the ag side of it, but I also wanted to just reiterate that we are an ag-based community, and a lot of what we do impacts our ag folks. And it's everything from being impatient during a drive on our roads to how we use water. And so please be mindful that all of what we do ultimately does have impacts to our ag folks. He talked about the fallowing of fields. I also talked to some of the livestock producers, and they were talking about not being able to take animals up to range this year because it's not going to be good enough to sustain them. And they're going to have to figure out if there's local fields they can pay for. And all of those things are costs, in addition to all the other diesel costs and all of those other things. So I just wanted to jump in on that. And then, I come a little bit from the rec background, and I think the river rafting, for instance, is one of the rec industries that's just not even going to happen this year. And that's small compared to us getting municipal and ag water. But there's a lot of impacts that kind of ripple around the state, basically, when these things happen. So I also am going to have a BREEN lawn. I already do. And I'm the only BREEN lawn on my block. So I actually asked Scott, can I get a little sign that explains I'm not being irresponsible? I'm actually trying to do the right thing. Because I think my neighbors are like, what? You get this new job and now you're just going to let your lawn go to heck? So, and for the record, I have barely had to mow. You are correct about that. That has been great. Okay, so I think if you have questions, make sure and make them available. I think we have Evelyn walking around. She's in the back now, but kind of raise it up so she knows, so she can grab it. Those will come forward to me. If you want to stretch, we're going to try and keep rolling because your time is valuable, but feel free to stand up and stretch for a minute while we get those questions collected. But don't leave. We're going to get going very quickly. Okay, everybody, if we can go ahead and sit back down. Hopefully we got to stretch. Thank you very much. Let me try from here.
Testing. Go closer.
Closer?
Too far. You want to go walk over there?
No, I'm good. I'll pose it. Sue,
Let's give all the mics.
because there are questions for the county. You want to pull up a chair? You sit there. Okay, thank you. Thanks, everybody. Boy, when we ask for good questions, you guys exceeded expectation. We're going to devote an hour, and that seems like a lot of time, but after seeing the questions, I think there may be some that we don't get to. What I will commit to you is that we will take all of them and try and get information out on our websites to get it out to you. Or if you'd like to call us, Sue already mentioned, you're welcome to call she or I anytime. Or reach out to the experts here. I think all of them, if I'm not mistaken, are very open to being contacted, and their contact info is on all their websites. So we want to get this information into your hands because that is how we're going to have some better outcomes with all of this. Okay, so I'm going to just dive in. The first one is agriculture is a primary economic driver in Montrose County. If drought conditions continue, does the county have any contingency plans in place? And I think the county has some influence over this, but a lot of ours is more of a long lead time in terms of codes and zoning. So I guess I would wonder if maybe Steve would have more of an idea about contingency plans.
This is even on. Can you hear?
Yeah.
Does this work? Okay. Our plan is historically we just adapt to the hydrology that we're provided. Our goal as a company, I think, is to modernize our system, become as efficient as we possibly can with the delivery and use of our water to help offset some of these impacts. At the end of the day, it's very challenging, and one of the things that I would say every agricultural system in the Western United States, certainly, inflation is just eating our lunch. When we're looking at lining canals and implementing these programs, we have one project right now. I was talking to someone. It's about $6 million a mile on some of our larger canals. So how do you pass that on to an agricultural producer? Everything seems to go up except for the price of a sack of onions, a bushel of corn, or a ton of hay. And so we need to figure out how we're going to offset those costs to become more efficient, to be able to live within the water that we're given.
Excellent, thank you. The next question is about the Shoshone water rights. So I don't know if maybe Raquel or Caleb would be. Is Denver taking water this year by special exemption? How will this affect the Gunnison Basin?
All right, thanks, Raquel. Shoshone water rights. In regard to Denver's diversions this year, I wouldn't say they're taking water by special exemption. There are a couple unique things going on this year in regard to administration on the Colorado River. So the first one that I'll speak to is because of the drought conditions, which are dictated by a couple of different thresholds, one being the amount of flow that is forecasted for April through July at the Kremling gauge on the Colorado River, as well as the amount of July 1st storage that Denver's projecting in their system. As a result of those both being less than 80%, what it has enacted is something called the 2007 Shoshone Call Relaxation Agreement. And that was an agreement between the Public Service Company of Colorado, who operates Shoshone Power Plant, and Denver Water. And it basically relaxes that Shoshone call during a specific period of time, a couple-month window here in the spring when those thresholds are met. So basically, because of that, the Shoshone Power Plant has only called, normally it has a 1,250 CFS water right and 158 CFS junior water right for a total of 1,408. This year, it can only call for 704 CFS during this prescribed time period, which actually ends on Thursday. So given that provision, I would say there has been a relaxation of the Shoshone call based on that agreement between Public Service Company of Colorado and Denver Water, which has provided, Denver and frankly, some of the upstream West Slope uses to continue to divert in priority given that call was not in place where it would have been given the low flows. I can tell you for sure, well, maybe not, I shouldn't say for certain, but very likely that there will be a call implemented at the Shoshone Power Plant when this agreement, the timeline of the agreement expires, which is on Thursday, given the current low flows. But yeah, other than that, I would say it's kind of been business as usual for Denver Water. They do have a number of diversions upstream of Green Mountain Reservoir that they're able to still take, but basically pay Green Mountain Reservoir back that water later in the year with what's called substitution water. But yeah, I would say the biggest change in regard to Shoshone and the administration on the main stem Colorado River is that relaxation agreement this year.
Just to add to the piece of the question on impacts to the Gunnison Basin, this is on the main stem of the Colorado River. It, for the most part, doesn't have an impact to the Gunnison Basin.
Thank you very much. That level of technical knowledge is pretty mind-blowing to me. So thank you guys very much for that. This question came up more than once, and I think it was spoken to, but I think it's important to bring up again. Could late spring snowstorms or precipitation make a difference for the 2026 season?
So yeah, this kind of falls in line with what I was trying to point out in regard to the monsoon. So right, every drop from the sky certainly helps. Now, is that going to take us, or is that going to offset the fact that we had snowpack, peak a month early at 50% of normal? Most likely not, or it won't, frankly. But I would say, again, any drop counts, and especially, if we can get into a strong afternoon thunderstorm or rainstorm cycle where we see those afternoon rains, that could certainly be helpful and absolutely assist with maybe lessening irrigation demand, especially for things like residential lawn and landscaping.
And I think one of the questions is also about El Nino. El Nino, you would consider that pretty much the same? Okay.
Yeah, I would say, the reason, or I think a big reason we're seeing that forecast, especially when they're forecasting conditions 3 months out, a lot of that forecast is driven by things, large scale kind of patterns such as El Nino, which do contribute to seeing that increased moisture or above average chances for above average precipitation here in the coming months.
One comment I like to make is, historically, as I mentioned earlier in our discussion, how much evaporation we see in this system. Typically in the middle of July, a hot sunny day, we see a 40 CFS loss in the water coming down the Uncompahgre. Likewise, cloudy days are good, even if it doesn't rain. That really helps, those flows. A good rain event in Uray can sometimes buy us a day or two of really sustainable irrigation water as it drains the system down here. Conversely, as a lot of the producers will say is, a bad rain event or an intense rain event right on the crop as they're trying to do something can be just more impactful than not having water. It delays their ability to get in the field. It beats the crop down. So there are the pros and cons. Ideally, in a perfect world, we get a tremendous amount of snow, good frozen snowpack, nice cool spring, and then a good summer rain. But those are challenges that we just have to kind of deal with them as they come.
Excellent, thank you. What are the restrictions on gray water usage in the city, county, and state?
I can start at the city level. So some communities have adopted allowing gray water. As part of our water resource master planning, it's one of the options. There's all these different various things of, does our community want that? I think Grand Junction has allowed it to be adopted. What that is people create separate plumbing systems within their house that, like, I think it ties to like tubs, maybe even laundry. You have to use certain kinds of soaps, things of that sort, to be reapplied on their lawn. The city hasn't adopted that. So far, the reason why is generally that you're adding, several thousand to a house, which is housing is already challenging. But what it's doing is now water that would have gone typically back down the drain. We don't see internal water use as necessarily as good of a focus as outdoor water use. So if you use water, it goes in your tub, take a shower, it goes into the drain, it goes through the treatment plant, and it's right back in the river in town for use by agriculture. And so anything that makes it kind of easier it's weird, everything in water is a trade-off. So if you have a gray water system, this is cheaper now, I can plant more grass. That's more consumptive use, less turf we don't want around, and less water available for irrigation. Because anything interior water use is fully collected and right back in the river. That's why we haven't considered that a viable trade-off. But again, there's a lot of community input that'll go into these things as regs start changing and things of that sort. And I don't know if anybody wants to talk it's probably similar at the county level, or
Yeah, we were able to rope our planning and development director, Talmadge, into coming up and speaking on the county.
Yeah, this is on. Can you hear me? We same thing. Reg 86. The county has not adopted that. I don't know. I know Delta County has adopted Reg 86, but I don't know of any other counties around us that have. It requires some technical knowledge and experience in our department that we're not necessarily prepared for in inspecting how those systems are installed, because it has to be done very carefully to make sure the right water is being drained to be reused, because the wrong water being drained to reused can be problematic. So we have been looking at that recently, and in terms of that could be an option to conserve water. But at this time, we don't have that reg adopted.
Thank you very much. Glad you were here. So this is another city question. Scott, does the city limit the size of new subdivisions that they allow or water per lot?
So right now, if a new subdivision comes in, we're seeing a pretty large trend in towards smaller lot sizes, more multifamily, just because of the economics of it. So a lot of that's happening naturally. If any new subdivision comes in under those new state regs, so like HOA, common spaces, even walking trail areas within a new subdivision cannot have turf, which again, that's our lowest hanging fruit. That's already prohibited. We think that's a good thing. So you'll see a lot more xeriscaping within residential subdivisions. Other than that, there aren't limitations on an individual homeowner's, once a subdivision's built, you have an individual lot, that individual homeowner builds a house, and then at their individual level are deciding what kind of lawn to put in. There aren't regulations at this time on what they can do with that. But like I said in my presentation, almost everybody is doing the right thing because they don't want wall-to-wall turf, because they don't want to mow it and they don't want to pay to water it. So the natural trend is in the right direction. And then as those state regulations come online in the next 2 years, there will be explicit prohibitions on how much turf can be on an individual residential lot. We just don't know exactly what that'll look like, and that'll be kind of developed in partnership with community engagement. So.
Thank you. This is a general question about wells. How wells can be used, and can those help with the water shortage situation?
I'll draw on my previous career, and I don't know if Evan Jones is still in the room with the Colorado Division of Water Resources, but it requires a well permit. I would certainly contact them. I mean, there are some specific criteria on obtaining a well, develop, the date of the parcel creation, the size of the parcel and whatnot. It is very specific. It is geographically specific as well. So your best bet is to contact the Colorado Division of Water Resources to get all the criteria to see if you would be something that would fit your needs.
Wells have a lot of nuances. Depends on what it's permitted for. It depends on what conditions you got it under. So like Steve said, just contact us if you have a well that you're thinking about using. In general, you can't just pump groundwater. It's all still tied to the priority system. It's still waters of the state. So it's not a free reservoir. We're not sitting over the Ogallala.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Glad you were here as well. This is for you also, Steve. Would the water users entertain meeting with subdivision HOAs to explain how we can deliver water back into the system better and what a share actually means?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're not opposed to meeting with them. I think it'd be great to have something where we bring in a group of HOAs as opposed to individually, because and every HOA is set up differently. Ideally, in my perfect world, if we had a subdivision and there was a common area that they could have a small pond, even though it would incur evaporation, that we could deliver to. Once the water gets out of our system, it's not as impactful to us as their pumping rate. A lot of the challenges is with these older established neighborhoods and HOAs. The infrastructure either wasn't put in for that. There are several limitations, but there's other things. There's rotational schedules, and again, a share of water is that we only have presently 2 shares of water. We have adobe soil versus mesa soil, and that's a flow rate, not a volumetric. There's an annual volumetric rate to it, but an instantaneous flow rate is what we deal with on our daily administration of those shares. And so we're always willing to answer questions and help subdivisions navigate those challenges.
That's a good idea. I think that's something we've actually talked about as well. This question is about the difference of what water in snowpack versus rainfall means.
I can start. The difference, right? Precipitation is the summation of snowfall and rainfall. Basically, water falling from the sky is precipitation. If it falls as rain, it's rain. If it falls as water, it's rain. If it falls as snow, it's a snowpack. And it's measured differently. The methods of measuring snowpack are different than measuring rainfall. And we didn't present, but the graph of precipitation for the water year 2026, it actually started off not bad. October was a really, really wet month. If you remember, there was these massive precipitation events, but it was warm. So it fell as rain. It didn't fall as snow. So until maybe January, we were at average precipitation conditions, but snowpack has always been pretty low. So temperature is what partitions precipitation into rain and snow is. I don't know if
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add is, living in the upper basin states where we don't have a large reservoir or multiple large reservoirs sitting above us where we can just turn on the spigot, snowpack truly is our natural reservoir, and we rely heavily upon that to provide us the water when we need it later throughout the spring, summer irrigation season. So I think that is a very important aspect of precipitation falling as snow versus rain is when we live in this system that relies on that snowpack to gradually release the water to us, similarly to how a reservoir might. It's really important in a snow melt driven system like the one we live.
I like that. That's one of our new mottos. The snow is our reservoir, essentially. Steve, I apologize, you're popular. What are your best estimates for irrigation water percentage for the rest of the growing year? And how, stand by.
Given this, we can only live with the conditions that we have. But given our current situation, I think that we can stay at 50% throughout the year, at least the majority of the irrigation season. Our goal, really is our producers really start to, by the time they get all their crops out of the field, the demand decreases after Labor Day. So Labor Day is a critical day for us. About a week and a half before Labor Day is when the push is, especially with like our specialty crops, the sweet corn guys, because their goal, they dry it up, they get that picked, and they want it sitting in a grocery store within 48 hours. And so they stagger their planting season to accommodate these demands as they go through the year. And so that's their target. That's their last key date, is that Labor Day weekend. So that's a target of ours, is to make that one. I think, if I'd love to say that we're going to have a super El Nino this year, and we're going to end, I think what year was it? One year we started on a fairly deep percentages. We ended on demand water. We couldn't give it away toward the end of the year just because it continually rained on us. Hope for that. But, I like right now, we just have to look at the next 3 weeks, 6 weeks. Where do we sit? I think we're pretty secure at 50% for the majority of this summer. If the monsoons don't present themselves, we have presented information to the insurance companies that we would be challenged to go. We might have to go lower than that. Unfortunately, we haven't found the bottom. At some point, we're going to hit a number where our system just does not function. The problem is if you put water in the canals and all of the head gates are at the upper 0.75%, right now we're just racing around with dump trucks full of concrete, backing the water up so we can physically get it out of the canal onto people's fields. Then we'll have to take all of that out, hopefully, for next year, because we're not going to need it. But back to the point of how much water it takes to charge the system, we have to be able to keep that system at an operational level to get the water to the users.
Yeah, that was a point of education for me recently with Steve, that they actually have to raise the bottom of some of these delivery systems with concrete so that they will then have enough flow and pressure to move forward in the system. So they're actually having to make modifications to that degree this year. So that was a real eye-opener. For Scott, how many households can city water system supply?
Right now, so envision our system 60% larger, essentially. We're using about 40% of our allocation. We did the modeling. We have a district, so within the various water entities, we have defined boundaries that we would serve. We can fully fill that district and have water to spare. Right now, on our current modeling, those are models that we revisit regularly. But essentially take our current number of households and add 60%, and that would fit within our current allocation as of today. And again, that's something we look at essentially on a monthly basis, but it's a continual planning thing that those things may change, but that's what we make our planning decisions based on. So I'm talking city. Yep. And then, you get into Tri-County. Tri-County's in a pretty similar boat. Yeah, he's back there. They're using similar 30-40%-ish of their system. So there is room to grow, and that's without ag conversion. So that's within the existing municipal pool that is allocated. Ag conversions is a dirty word. It's not something we generally operate on, but you see it in the Front Range where they're taking water that was earmarked towards irrigation, reallocating it to housing. That's nothing that's anywhere near on the horizon for any of us. We have our municipal pool. It's already allocated. It's been being paid for since Ridgeway was built. And we've been overpaying on it for all this time to leave room to grow without having to go into ag. And so that's the beauty of that, is there's a lot of runway for us to keep doing that, and ag stays its own pot and municipal stays its own pot. So. Physical water. No, so I'm talking physical water. So that allocation is Ridgeway. So the only way that allocation is threatened is Ridgeway goes out of priority during its fill, which is a pretty rare situation.
So I don't want any walking around thinking that we can grow like crazy, because I think that the responsible thing to do is to continue to have these kind of interactions so we learn and understand, because that, in other areas, the weather may not be tied to their land use, but in our case, it really is. And so, don't leave thinking we can grow exponentially, because I think we do have some things that could impact that in the future. So 5 more years of drought like this, and, I'm not sure what happens. So
yeah, absolutely. And it is not static by any means. No, let's bring them all in. It is something we continually are changing. Again, almost monthly, that we're keeping an eye on this stuff. And the other piece of that too is growth. It feels crazy, but residential growth is relatively tempered around here. There's only so many contractors. This absorption rate of the market is relatively slow. We see on average 1.5% to 2% per year. So you don't get these mega booms that happen overnight. There just isn't the market to do that. And we think that's an excellent thing. Slow and steady wins the race. You see a lot of communities that have exploded. That's not good. That's not at all what we're trying to do. We don't think that's a good thing. We think slow, steady, and smart is a good thing. And that's what we're trying to operate on. But sounds like Steve had a thought.
I just want to make one comment regarding, we only call it growth here. As Raquel mentioned in her presentation, the 7 states negotiation, we're getting closer to that 75. All of the municipalities on the Front Range have water rights that are junior to the compact. So they're 1950s, 40s, 60s. They are subject to curtailment should we get into compact administration. The statute or the constitution of the state allows for some health and human services. So the western slope agricultural producers that have the senior water rights have the big target on their back. We are the low-hanging fruit, and they are going to come here. Mark my word, they're going to come here to take the water. And I have some very strong feelings about what should be allowed. I fully support health and human safety. You can put it in a school, you can put it in a house, you can put it in a hospital. But nobody on the Front Range should operate their car wash at the expense of an agricultural producer on the western slope. And, in addition to us solving our issues, we're secure in our area, but we do hold, and all of the western slope irrigators hold that seniority in that water. And if it comes to that, and that's why we're trying to preserve those levels in Powell, we're negotiating to maintain that water in Blue Mesa for our long-term commitment, so we don't have to have those conversations with the Front Range entities on how they're going to stay in water.
And the main reason the Colorado River District exists.
I guess just a word on that topic. I think there is a lot of risk and there's a lot of uncertainty as to what the future will be, because Steve is right. If there is a scenario, and there is a scenario that is very realistic, where we don't meet compact deliveries, and there's different interpretation about what compact deliveries are. But if we get into a fight, if we go below whichever one of those numbers, and there's curtailment within the state of Colorado because of that, in the state of Colorado, there's going to be a lot of difficult and legal battles, because the River District is going to put up a fight, a big fight. There's no way, as Steve says, the Front Range is going to irrigate lawns and use the water for things that are beyond health and safety. And I think the River District's work right now is to have conversations and dialogue so that we can have a future where we don't necessarily have to fight those fights, that we can work together within the state and within this larger basin, so that we are not in a situation where we don't know what the future holds. And I'll leave it there.
Yeah, obviously this topic is a tough one as well. We talk upper and lower basin, and now we talk Front Range and Western Slope, and it starts to get extremely impactful. And I think that's where the leadership at all the levels is going to make a big difference, and having those conversations before it's in a crisis. Similar to the basin compact, it's a crisis, and it seems like a crazy time to be now trying to solve it when ahead of time would have been a lot better. And I think that's incumbent on all of us. So, Steve, this is for you. Farmers following fields, how does that affect the return flow? And for instance, are they depending on that wastewater downstream?
Yes. And that's one of the things that we are constantly addressing is our system was set up in the early 1900s, and it's kind of, rather than have a big canal coming out of the river going to the far corners, it was based on the, and I'm not going to call it inefficiency, but I'm going to call it the flood irrigation with those return flows. And when farmers are fallowing certain fields, it does put an impact on that and how we can get water to them. So that's what our staff struggles with daily is, we don't know from one year to the other what crops are going to run on those fields, what they're going to fallow, if they're on percentages. And so we're always trying to get ahead of them and predict these challenges and these pinch points within our system. I will say that we participated with the River District in developing a base model a couple of years ago that really allows us to look at the analytics and how water moves through our system, as I showed some pictures of merge points and all of our deliveries. So we can kind of, if we know that certain fields are fallowed, it'll kind of say, hey, you're going to have a problem in this corner. How are we going to address that issue? So yeah, it is impactful to our system. And a lot of it, again, comes into the timing part of it too.
I want to tag to this question. In a year like 2026 in the Uncompahgre system, you're seeing maybe half of the acreage being fallowed. This happens every year to some percentage. And if it doesn't happen in a year here in Montrose, it is happening somewhere in the state of Colorado and within the Western Slope. This reiterates, Sue, you had made this point of living within our hydrology. The snowpack, as Caleb importantly pointed out, is our reservoir, but the reservoir doesn't carry on year to year. It all melts out every year. Lake Mead doesn't all melt out every year, right? There is water that carries over, and they have a buffer that is multi-year buffer. We don't have that buffer here in the Upper Basin. In a year like this year, where half of the acreage is being fallowed here in this valley, no one is being paid by the federal government to use less water and to irrigate a smaller amount of land. In the Lower Basin, when we're having these interstate negotiations, if they want to reduce water usage, they're kicking and screaming, pay us to fallow our fields, right? And here in the Upper Basin, we do that every year, and no one gets financially compensated for that. And so I just wanted to tie that in.
Yeah. I think living within the means is what we're used to and not getting paid to do so. And I think that's a perspective that they don't share. Similarly tied to this, because we are potentially impacting some of our fused storage, we don't have big ones like Mead and Powell, how does this year affect upcoming water years in terms of water supply?
I guess I'll start, but maybe everyone wants to speak to this. So for the most part, or this is generalizing, but it's, I think, a good generalization, that reservoirs in the Upper Basin, they were designed to fill in the spring when we have peak runoff, so that in the summer and in the fall, water users have water to meet their needs. So it's designed on a year basis, right? You fill in the spring, you use it in the summer. Some of it at times carries over to the next year, but for the most part, this water is used in the same calendar year. And so it doesn't, next year for the most part, we don't know what next year is going to hold. And the reservoirs here in the Upper Basin, they're not large like Lake Mead or Powell, right? Mead and Powell each of them are 25 million acre feet. The two of them together are 50 million acre feet of water. Blue Mesa is the largest reservoir in Colorado. It's less than 1 million acre foot. It's 800,000 acre feet. So the magnitudes are very different. And here.
Yeah, as part of our annual operations, we try to leave a certain pool of water in Ridgeway and in Taylor Park each year, ensuring that we're going to get a fill for next year. I think this year we're going to dip into that significantly. So we, at best, we have maybe 2 years, maybe not. I will say the only good thing, or the silver lining, is they are small enough that should we have an average or slightly above average year, we would be, even if they were very low, we would be able to catch up quickly, whereas on the bigger reservoirs, it's just not practical. But so we try to leave a little bit in there, a 2-year plan, if you will. This year, we're going to be pushing it. Either that, or we're going to have to curtail our deliveries to ensure that we carry that storage into the fall and winter season. So we have next year. But a lot of it is I wish I knew I had that 3-month crystal ball, because then we know when to take it out. We're going to watch the hydrology over the next 2 months very closely to see, we have this pool of water in Ridgeway. When is the optimal time to release it? Will it be to give the farmers the last little bit to finish their crop, or will it be to preserve flows in the system to keep us at a percentage for a period of time? So we the next, I would say, 3 months are going to be pretty critical for us, and we're going to be monitoring that daily.
Thank you. That's a perspective. This is a question about a couple of specific things that are water intensive, and if they are going to help us by curtailing specifically Palisade, peaches, fruit crops. If anybody knows if there's any plans for them to also be following some of that or sharing in some of the shortages, and then also golf courses. Sorry to target, but
regarding all of the crops in the North Fork, it's I hate to say it's easy. It's painful, and it's not easy for a row crop farmer to fallow ground, but it's something that they can do and recover the next year. Orchard producers, it takes years. They cannot fallow. In our discussions with folks in the North Fork and folks in the Palisade area, they are nipping the buds already. They're stressing them out to put them in dormancy. Their sole goal this year is to preserve the trees. They are not planning on growing a crop. It is self-preservation of a long-term asset. So that regarding that, golf courses, they're water users. I don't know. It's not, if they, I think that's more an economic decision on their part. I don't, if they can, if they're going to irrigate it with what they can. I don't know how they're going to adjust their schedule. But it's not unlike a large residential lawn. And it may be, I would use an example. I mean, Cobble Creek or any of the courses in this area that actually have Uncompahgre shares, they're limited. They're at 50% too. So however they choose to use their 50%, it's kind of their management decision.
BREEN is a new green for golfing too. To get kind of to a direct point, Steve, is there going to be a point when head gates are locked?
Head gates are locked today.
Okay.
We have certain ones that at least on our producers that may, if they have rotational contracts and they're changing water, we monitor their usage throughout the farm, the larger farming unit, but they, everything should be pretty well locked. And then if we have, especially if we're having issues with self-adjustment, they will be locked. And they will be monitored closely.
We need the same thing for wallets, I think, too. A way to lock it. I'm not sure that this is specific to overall water shortages, but the question is, what's the progress of the Project 7 diversion system of potable water supply?
I can take that one. I've kind of taken a fresh roll on that. So Project 7, are they here? No. Hey, Adam, you want me to tell a story? You want to tell a story? Okay. So Project 7 was looking at, one of the challenges of our system, I hope you guys have an hour. One of the challenges of that system is single straw, single source. And so that is a vulnerability that's been long recognized. The initial thought as a response to that was a secondary, smaller treatment plant down out of Uncompahgre water, straight out of Ridgeway Reservoir. Again, those shares are there, so if you're not using any exchange, you can just pull straight from the reservoir. That project kind of grew arms and feet, got bigger and bigger, and it ultimately, I think the final price tag was around 165 million or so. When it came time, is that worth the 165 million? The general support, to pay 165 million, that's no small amount. That's a lot of lending, a lot of fund stuff, grants, all the things to make that work from all the partner agencies. As it came time to fund that, it really kind of drove them back to the drawing board a little bit of, is that the best bang for our buck? Is that the best use of our resources? The Project 7 board, in response to that, created what's called a technical advisory group, or what they call the technical advisory group. That's made of kind of the more staff level at the agencies for all the various entities to take that fresh look at what is the best bang for our buck and what's the best way to get as much resiliency and redundancy as possible while still being affordable. Cost of living is a very real thing for most of our rate customers. And so making sure that we properly find that sweet spot. Not saying a plant won't happen at the southern end. That's still absolutely part of the probably long-term equation in some fashion. But they're taking a fresh look at what kind of actions can be taken, great partnerships with all of the various stakeholders to maximize and modernize the existing plant and its infrastructure and its needs while increasing the resiliency needs in a cost-effective manner. Affordability really became the challenge. And so working to do that, we don't know exactly what the future will hold, but it'll give a really good comprehensive picture of what's needed. And we're pretty confident there's a lot of good solutions out there that will be cost effective. There's no silver bullet in any of it, like anything in water, but it will drastically improve our situation. Again, the situation's not bad. The system works well. We have really good partners that make the system work well, but we want to make sure that we're good for the 100-year horizon. And I think there's a lot that can be done cost effectively to get us there. And so more to come. TBD is a long way of saying that, but did I capture that all right? Yep. 30 at reduced. So yeah, say our bad day happens. The biggest thing everyone talks about is, does the Gunnison Tunnel collapse? Then what? The likeliest scenario now, you'd go on to immediate water reductions. So you take, your summer peak of 15 to 16 million gallons a day down to 5 or 6. Distribute that throughout the agencies using Sero water. That gives us a month, depending on how high Fairview is. That gives you some additional time. And then if the Gunnison Tunnel's out, it's the reality is the irrigation system is out. So there's a lot of tunnels a lot of canals that can be used in partnership to get water to the head of the plant. That's actually some of the immediate emergency plans we're working on right now to make sure that those systems, we kind of know exactly how we do that, but getting that all formally adopted by all the agencies. So there are options. Nobody wants to think of the day the Gunnison Tunnel collapses, because that's the reason we're on this map. And it's not a likely thing, but anything can happen, and it's something we need to plan for and prepare for. So absolutely part of the equation.
So I have a couple of repeating questions. One is very big picture, and it has to do with the Bureau of Rec. If negotiations don't work out, they're already enacting certain kinds of provisions that you mentioned at Lake Powell. What are things that the Bureau could do in order to control the situation?
So the Bureau in January, as I mentioned, they had this draft environmental impact statement that looked at 5 different alternatives for how they could operate the system into the future. And these alternatives are a range of what they are going to be looking as their preferred alternative in their final EIS. These 5 alternatives, in terms of what the power they have, what they can do, there was an alternative. The second alternative was basic coordination, I think it was called. It's what they said they would do if there was no additional agreements between the states, because they felt like the bits and pieces of the other alternatives were outside of their power, of their control. That basic alternative concept had very uncertain language in it that is concerning for us. An example of the language is, if to protect Lake Powell, additional actions might be pursued. Great. What are these additional actions? And some of this language, it points to, in the upper basin, the Bureau potentially coming into their federal projects and taking actions. We don't know, it's not spelled out, but I think it gives us, it potentially could indicate that, which is very concerning. Also, it can't resolve the problem. Like, coming to Ridgeway or Paonia Reservoir and releasing that water, it's a drop in the bucket. It will not solve the problem. The problem is only going to be solved with reductions of water usage in the lower basin. The bottom line is that. And that's the only way to solve the mathematical problem that we're having with less water. So the Bureau right now, what we've been hearing, it's not, we haven't heard it directly from the Bureau, but it's been in a paper. Someone was talking about it. Their draft preferred alternative, let's call it that, is potentially looking at reduction of usage in the lower basin of up to 3 million acre feet per year. But it's like there's room for renegotiation every 2 years. We'll never stop talking, and it's just because the reason is because 3 million acre feet is not enough. If we see this continuous conditions, it's not enough, and that's why we'll have to keep talking, because your preferred alternative doesn't do enough. So that's what Steve.
Yeah. So we operate our federal project, this project, the Uncompahgre project, Gunnison Tunnel, and Ridgeway or Taylor Park Reservoir are all held in the name of the U.S. government. The Bureau of Reclamation retain control ownership of the facilities and the water rights. Our contract is a 1948 contract. We've had the Attorney General's office, some other legal counsel, our internal legal counsel review the document. It's there, as Raquel mentioned, there is some ambiguity in some of the languages that they use. It's very vague. And so we are aware of that. It's the contract we feel is fairly robust in protecting us, but with that questionable language. But again, we're also hanging our hat on, the reality of it is we could dry up our entire system. Our annual consumptive use is probably about, it wouldn't offset the evaporative losses at Lake Mead for a month. You can dry, that's to get to her point. It has to be done in the lower basin. We are such a small amount, and I don't think that they fully understand that. I've heard that they're looking for these phantom reservoirs where we're hiding water. I've given tours to the Central Arizona Project Board, and we've stood at the head gate of the M&D Canal and said, in times of shortage, we place a call and we can call out 80% of the county. And they're like, what does that mean by call them out? I said, they're shut off. They don't get to use any more water for the year. And they just have this glazed over look that they don't understand it. they're going to learn it very quickly in the next 5 years, in my opinion. But, and it's taken us 50 years of legal fighting and living without to develop how to adapt to this. And I think they're going to get the crash course.
On a smaller note, a couple questions about if somebody's concerned about a pump, is there a best practice of how to let you guys know that somebody might be using a pump?
I would say contact our office and we would go out and investigate whether they have, the pump has shares or what the details of the pump are. And we can address it that way. We have our staff out looking and re-looking because they somehow grow overnight. But so yeah, I just contact our office with as much specifics and we would go out and investigate.
Probably not go person to person because they won't know the details at all, like shares and so on.
Yeah, correct.
Okay. All right. So I think we actually are going to start to wrap up. And in that light, I wanted to offer our panel the opportunity to any closing remarks that you might have for everybody as we head out into the rest of the season to grapple with this.
Now nobody wants to take the.
But in general, I'll go back to at central of our theme is every drop counts. At a local level, we don't feel there's any villains. We're all in this. We really are all in this together. We all rely on each other, and we're hopeful that people do the right thing. And our community is good at coming through these things. We're happy to be a part of it and facilitate how we can. That's my takeaway, I guess.
I think on that note, well, first of all, and this was mentioned earlier on, know where your water comes from, right? We turn on the faucet, water comes out of it. Who cares where it comes from, right? But if we don't know, we're disconnected from all of these topics and issues and how they actually impact us. On the topic of working together, I think that is true here in the Uncompahgre Valley, in Montrose. It is true basin-wide as well. I know that we've come to a point at times where people are pointing fingers at each other, and you could be critical of me and say I'm pointing fingers at the lower basin this morning as well. But, some of it has to be done, I would say. But for us to resolve the issue in this basin, the only way we're going to solve it is by working together. And we have to work together with Arizona and with California and with Nevada to move out of this, because litigation is not going to do anything for us. And someone might tell you differently. It will not. Being in litigation for 10 years, and it's not going to be less than 10 years, what is going to happen? Who's going to be willing to invest any dollar in a region that there's uncertainty tied to water? And I think we are doing a lot of work to try to have a future that's different from that. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'd just like to reiterate, it's really meaningful and impressive to see the interest and engagement that this community continues to have in water. And certainly it doesn't go unnoticed. So what I would leave you with is, we at the River District are definitely here to serve you first and foremost. The reason we exist is because of your taxpayer dollars. So certainly, please do not ever hesitate to reach out if there's anything we can do to help support you, especially during these difficult drought times.
Oh, no, I'm the last one. Yeah, I guess just to recap, we're living in the world of variable hydrology where our precipitation is coming at odd and sometimes inconvenient times. Our system is not set up to manage that. And we're facing other pressures from dealing with a 100-year-old system and growth and development. And as we navigate through that, it's going to take some patience. I but we can't stop. I don't want to, and we aren't going to stop in the sense that, I look not to bag on the lower basin anymore, but I will. They've buried their head in the sand for the last 25 years, and we haven't. I mean, I think we need to continue to adapt and modify our system, modify how we deliver water here to the various uses, address growth issues, and still try to maintain that mission and keep the agricultural community here vibrant.
Thank you. And I really want to recognize our panel. They did not get lobbed only easy questions today. They are dealing with probably one of the most important issues in our community and our state. And so the fact that they brought their knowledge and expertise and were willing to get in front of us and represent an issue that doesn't have a happy side to it right now very much. So thank you guys very much. And I think Sue has some closing words. I also want to say that the reason that, and this was Sue's good idea, most of the good ideas are hers, is that this is the most important issue in front of us. Potentially fire is also going to become one of the most important issues, and we will make sure to get out ahead of that and lead as well. But I just want to tell you that the county is wanting to reflect the importance of this issue back to the community. And if you didn't get your question answered and you aren't sure who to send it to, I definitely am willing to take it and route it. And we want to make sure and get that knowledge out there because your investment and your time and your knowledge is what's going to make a difference. So, and I'll turn it over to Sue.
Thank you, Kirsten. So I too want to thank you all for your time and your energy and your advice and your humor. Especially in such a difficult situation. And I want to thank you guys. You know who you are. We have frequent flyers that are at every water summit. And I want to thank you for being interested in learning more and being educated and participating. And it's been awesome to have you at our water summit. For those of you who are new, please mark November 13th on your calendar. That's the next water summit. I think it's a good model to have one in the spring before the season gets going and one in the fall when we maybe get to celebrate. I mean, maybe we have a hell of a monsoon and it works just the way we want it to. Who knows? That's kind of how we have to operate. But I wanted to... I just want to leave you with this. You know, we all most of us share a ditch. We have neighbors. Talk to your neighbors. We live in a time now where people don't talk to each other, and I'm going to encourage you to work things out with your neighbor, whether it's a timing schedule, whether it's, that you don't like what they're doing, they talk to them. I know there's some cranky people, and you know who you are, that don't want to talk to anybody, but I think that we want to try to make that effort and consider changing habits and be kind to each other. And like the weather, like when we can weather the storm together in the spirit with which this community was established and has grown. So thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate you. If you have any questions, as Kirsten said, please reach out. We're happy to chat. So thank you all for being here.